The CoCo Crew podcast is hosted by CyberEars. If you are serious about your podcast hosting needs, you should check out CyberEars. Whether you are a podcaster, a radio host, a musician, a narrator, an audiobook author, or simply a school, church, corporation, or anyone else with an audio recording that needs to be hosted or distributed, you should check out cyberears.com. Unlimited bandwidth, fast, reliable, and rugged servers with no hidden fees. CyberEars. Your audio, your terms.
It's a blast from the past.
Please listen carefully.
CoCo.
Welcome to the CoCo Crew podcast. A delicious adventure into the world of retro computing news and information. Featuring the Tandy Color Computer.
Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet?
CoCo.
All right, CoCo Cruisers. Welcome to another delicious adventure with the CoCo Crew. This is episode 40. I, of course, am John Linville. We're joined by all our regular hosts. We've got Mr. Neil Blanchard. Hello, Neil.
Hello, everyone.
We've got Mr. Mike Rowan. Myro. Hello, Myro. How are you?
I'm doing good. Hi, everybody.
Let's see. We've got Boise Pete. Hello, Boise.
Hello.
And, of course, our newest regular host, Mr. Ron Klein. Hey, Ron, what's up?
Hey, everybody.
So, everyone have a good month? Doing well?
Yeah.
Awesome. TikTok, Tandy Assembly is just about a month away. Everyone getting ready there for that? I'm not going to be able to be there, but hopefully everyone else is prepared.
Working feverishly.
Let's see. On top of that, I'm sure that'll be a great event. But then 6 months later, it'll have CoCo Fest, so that's now 7 months away, and all getting prepared there. I should maybe mention that I had volunteered to run for vice president of Glenside, the organization that puts on CoCo Fest, and somehow I came out as a nominee for president of Glenside.
I saw your political cards.
Yeah, and Boise helped me out with some political artwork, a little bit tongue in cheek, but which did not fail to pull a few trolls out of the woodwork. But I mean, you know, that's sort of the way things are these days, I guess. So what's everybody doing? Is everybody keeping up with the hobby? Anyone doing anything interesting recently? Neil?
Well, I was just at VCF Midwest, and I was demoing my BBS on my table.
Oh, yeah? That's still a success?
It's still a success, yeah, and I got some new users from it. I made up some postcards to give away for everybody, and so I got a lot of new users that were at the show. They logged in, checked it out.
Very good, very good. I know Mike was there with you as well, right, Mike?
Yeah, it was a great show. Had a good time. I've actually been tinkering with a CoCo Pi 3 and got to spend a little time with Ron. Had it set up and going over a few things, so that's been kind of cool.
All right, very cool. So, Ron, you were at VCF as well?
Yeah, I wish I could have spent more time there. I was on call this weekend for work, but it was good seeing Neil and Mike. I did spend some time with Mike, like he had mentioned, going over the CoCo Pi. Great event. It was my second one. And I thought attendance was really, really good. Full house. They may have to look for a new venue soon.
Wow.
And good opportunity to meet some other people in the community, spend some time talking to some people I met last year that were all there. So I recommend it for anybody that hasn't gone. If you're able, get out there. It's a really good show.
Cool, very cool. Well, Boise, let's see, I guess you probably didn't make VCF. Are you keeping busy with your academic pursuits these days?
Yeah, I applied for candidacy and expect to be accepted on that this coming month. And then I'm ABD, all but dissertation at this point, so I'm in the middle of research And unfortunately, due to some commitments, I will not be at the Tandy Assembly nor at CoCo Fest next year. So,
Wow.
by the time the next CoCo Fest rolls around, I hopefully will be done with my PhD pursuits.
Oh, very cool, very cool. I did notice, for those who are Twitter people, Kevin Savitz, who's somewhat well known in the retro computing podcasting world, has done some archival work and had located I guess a master's thesis that involved the CoCo, and he was posting about that, and he said something about this is the only thesis that involves the CoCo, and I noticed you chime in there, Boise.
I have to correct him on that. I actually used the CoCo for my master's thesis back in 2010, so okay, as it happens. So.
Very cool, very cool. What about acquisitions? Anybody got anything cool recently?
Well, I got a big haul at VCF. So picked up this nice Canadian gentleman sold me some SciQuest Easy 135 SCSI drives.
Oh, yeah.
So, thanks, Neil.
Wow.
Got a couple of those. And I also got a pair of Radio Shack Tandem drives, and I have to thank Ron for that because he led me over to where he saw them on the Atari table, of all places. We kept finding CoCo stuff at the Atari tables. But those are nice. I picked up a mint condition CoCo 2. It's a 16K, but has all the cables and everything with it. That's fantastic. And one more great item is I got a Disto Super Controller with
cool.
the 4 ROMs, switchable ROMs in it. So it's got 4 operating systems on it. So it was a good haul for me.
Very nice, very nice. Anyone else? Anything cool recently?
Well, I almost pulled the trigger on those drives, and I showed Mike. And if he wouldn't have got them, I would have picked him up. And what was interesting about that, like he had mentioned, that was back in the Atari corner. And that's where the only MC10 was in the entire show. Slor, the gentleman back there, brought it last year as well. And he had it out demoing one of his he actually wrote some software for it and was demoing it. So
cool. Good old Slor. He's a pretty nice guy.
He is. So he represented the MC10. I thought it was great.
Who was that again?
Slor?
Slor from the Atari.
Oh, yeah. What's his real name?
I forget his real name.
No one knows.
I met him before, yeah.
Didn't he help out with some of your test code for the Liberator 9?
Yeah, he did. He wrote the Liberator 9 Atari demo. That's right. I forgot about that.
Cool.
Yeah.
What's interesting about Slor is he hangs out in IRC, and I noticed today he was in the CoCo channel asking about CoCo development. So I thought that was very interesting.
That's very cool. Yeah, we don't talk much about the CoCo IRC channel, but for those that are IRC literate or whatever the term is, it's a pretty decent place to hang out and get some good technical advice on things from time to time. Let's see. Yeah, I haven't picked up much CoCo stuff recently. I did pick up, let's see. So for those that are aware of one of the more rare gaming consoles of the early 21st century, the Nuwan. I did pick up a Nuwan game, Space Invaders XL, factory sealed, very exciting. And then just to mix things up, I also bought a package of Choose Your Own Adventure books. You guys remember those from childhood, or some of us at least?
Oh, yeah.
And then I also recently picked up a few things. I picked up some software for the Panasonic JR200U, which is kind of an oddball Japanese computer that has a 6800 in it. And then also a few packages for the Neck Trek, which is also an oddball Japanese computer that's got a Z80 in it, but also has a 6847 for video. I even picked up a Tumblebugs package, which is the Neck Trek's version of Megabug. Someone suggested that Steve Bjork was involved with that one. I'm not sure if that's true or not. But, as close to Tandy related as I could get right now. I have been working a bit on a prototype for a card that does I2C storage, so maybe that'll be a feature I can add to game cards in the future. But that's something to be out there. I did get involved in a little dust up on the blog. Yeah. Well, someone, I'll just say someone made a factual statement that was incorrect on another podcast. I don't know if we'll talk about that too much more or not, but I attempted to correct it, and denials ensued. And, well, you know, it is what it is. But that kind of distracted me. I haven't been working much on my MC10 compiler lately. I did break it back out today, so hopefully that'll lead to something.
Cool.
Anyway, well, are we warmed up? Does that get us ready for the rest of the show? I think so.
I think so.
All right, why don't we take a little break, and then we'll be back with our announcements.
New from the Rainbow Connection, Colorcom E, the smart terminal package. We didn't wait for the competition to catch up with us. We've added even more basic features to Colorcom E, our superb smart terminal program for the color computer. Compare before you buy. Nobody offers you more. Complete upload and download support. Online cassette disc reads and writes. 110, 300, 600, or 1200 baud. Full or half duplex. Re-enter data before calling. Saves you money. Offline and online scroll. Automatic capture of files. Send all 127 ASCII characters from the keyboard. Mode eliminates split words. 7 or 8 data bits, including graphics support. Efficient data storage, stretches memory, ROM pack, or disk. Colorcom E is just $49.95. And our efficient storage and easy editing of receiving data makes printing to your printer offline a snap. Select any portion of the received data for print. No need to print everything. Only from the Rainbow Connection. New York State residents add appropriate sales tax.
All right, and now we're back with our announcements. So you are, of course, listening to the CoCo Crew podcast. We are available on Twitter as @CoCo Crew Podcast, all one word. If you're someone who likes to tweet, feel free to tweet at us. We might even tweet back. In addition, we are available with a Facebook page. You can search for the CoCo Crew Podcast, and that's 4 separate words because that's the way things roll on Facebook. But do come and check us out if you're a Facebook user, and who is not. These days, so many are, at least. We do try to get some relevant news and posts out there from time to time. If nothing else, information about our podcast and the CoCo world in general. We are the CoCo Crew Podcast. We are available on iTunes and through Google Play for normal searches of podcasts and such. You can get the download information from those sources. We're also available on Stitcher and through TuneIn for streaming. So if you like to stream things on your Amazon Echo or whatever, just shout out, Alexa, play the CoCo Crew podcast, and Alexa will comply. Let's see, we are a member of the Throwback Network. The Throwback Network is a collection of retro-themed podcasts. Some are technology related, some are 80s culture, and others are just normal geekdom, I guess. When you're done listening to the CoCo Crew podcast, and you're looking for other podcast sources, then do feel free to check out the Throwback Network. We're also listed on the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. Similarly, this is a list of retro-themed podcasts. In this case, they're related to technology and gaming, so you'll find various retro machines, the Ataris and television and, whatever else. So, again, once you're done listening here, if you're looking for more retro content, then do check out the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. Audio for the CoCo Crew podcast is hosted by CyberEars. If you have a need to host audio on the internet, then we recommend that you check out CyberEars, where you will get your audio on your terms. If you'd like to reach out and contact the host at the CoCo Crew, then we have some email addresses set up. We have 3 that will reach all of the hosts. Those are show, SHOW, at CoCoCrew.org, podcast, PODCAST, at CoCoCrew.org, or feedback, FEEDBACK, at CoCoCrew.org. All of those will work. Just to send email to all of the hosts on the show. If you want to reach one of us individually, then we also have John, JOHN, at CoCoCrew.org, Neil, NEIL, at CoCoCrew.org, Mike, M-I-K-E, at CoCo.org. Boise, B-O-I-S-Y, at CoCo.org. And Ron, R-O-N, at CoCo.org. Those will reach your hosts individually. Let's see. Those are kind of our standard announcements, and now we're going to talk a little bit about some upcoming events that we think might be of interest to our listening audience. First up on the list, October 19th through 20th of 2018, we have the Portland Retro Gaming Expo. This is reported to be a cool event in the Pacific Northwest. Lots of retro game content and such. We'll have retro gaming celebrities and such. Opportunity to play arcade games from other video games. So big event. Have not been to it, but it sure does look cool to me. So if you're in the Pacific Northwest part of the United States, or that close by in Canada, then I recommend you check out the Portland Retro Gaming Expo. Coming up November 10th of 2018, the Chicago TI International World's Fair 2018. This, of course, is an event that is dedicated to the Texas Instruments computers, TI-99-4A in particular. I'm not sure if the others are represented, but I assume they probably are. Anybody been to this event? No? Okay. Well, if you're a TI user, you may want to check out the Chicago TI International World Fair coming up on November 10th. Of course, November 10th through 11th, better use of your time would be to head out to Tandy Assembly. Tandy Assembly, of course, an event dedicated to all Tandy computers. This will be November 10th and 11th in Springfield, Ohio. I hear there's a lot of careful planning going into this and some really cool people. And their headliner is going to be Stuart Chaffee of the Computer Chronicles, which used to grace public television every weekend back in the 80s and 90s. So,
sorry you're not there, man.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, well, if it wasn't for my old man travel problems, then I'd try to be there.
Hey, you missed Ben Heck at the VCF too.
I did, yeah. Well, did anybody ask him about his retirement? Oh, well, that's a whole different story, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving on. Next event, December 1st to 2nd of 2018. They actually have announced this now, so congratulations, Neil, for persevering. This will be World of Commodore 2018. So this is an event dedicated to Commodore. I think they're pretty open to other retro computing stuff. I've heard it's a great event. Neil tells me so anyway. It'll be in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And very big event. You planning to go to that, Neil?
Yep, I'll definitely be there. I mean, it's too close not to go. And,
definitely.
And like you said, it is a good event. They do welcome other platforms. It's not just Commodore-based. So it's a great show.
Cool. All right. Well, that gets us through the end of 2018. Wrapping around for events already announced in 2019. Of course, we have on May 4th and 5th of 2019, CoCo Fest. CoCo Fest 2019 will be the 28th annual last Chicago CoCo Fest. Hopefully, it's still not the last one. It will be, of course, held again at the Heron Point Convention Center in Lombard, Illinois. This is a big event. We all have a soft spot in our heart for CoCo Fest, and it's kind of the big mecca for CoCo users. Been going on for 27 years so far, and this will make 28. Can't say enough about it. Anyone want to testify to how great CoCo Fest is? Boise? Maybe not.
Touch the heron.
Touch the heron. Yeah, come and touch the
I
heron.
was on mute. That's exactly what I said. I said, touch the heron. Nothing else.
Oh, Lord. So definitely a good event. I think we'll all be there. Even a Linux event will not keep me from CoCo Fest. So they'll be there May 4th and 5th, 2019. And then, of course, if it's for the Apple II aficionados in the crowd, Kansas Fest has already announced its dates. for 2019. That'll be July 15th through the 21st of 2019. Kansas Fest is, of course, the geek camp at Rockhurst University in Kansas City, Missouri. Go and sleep in the dorms, shower in the prison-style showers, eat at the eat at the university cafeteria. It's kind of fun. There are some hardships, I suppose, but it fills up every year, so it's a cool event. All right, well, that covers our event announcements. So I think we'll take another little break, and then we'll be back with some news.
Dude, you have to see this.
What is it?
It's the Proto-EEPROM CC from Prototech. I can program 2716, 2732, and 2732A EEPROMs.
So my EEPROM burner can do that.
This one has 4K of RAM so you can create and debug your RAM image before you burn your ROM.
Wow.
It's fully powered by the color computer. No wall warts or cords to get tangled. It just plugs into your cartridge slot.
Nice.
You can program the RAM or ROM directly from BASIC or assembly language.
Where can I get one?
It's just $149.95 from Prototech.
That's a bargain.
The Proto-EEPROM CC from Prototech, Boulder, Colorado.
All right, CoCo Cruisers, and now for your favorite part, we're back with some news. First item of news we're going to cover, I've got one from the 8-Bit Guy, and he has done an interesting little bit, well, it's interesting to me, on taking color photos from a black and white camera. Now, he's using some Commodore stuff. I think that's his home system of interest or whatever, but it's a neat technique that I think a lot of us have seen. I guess he's not even doing Commodore, he's doing a PC with a quick cam. Anyway, it's a neat technique that people used to use. It's kind of a retro thing, where basically you take black and white pictures through color filters and then use some other software to recombine the three black and white pictures into a color picture. I just always have thought that's a neat thing to do, and people can do it with like the DS69 or, one of the other digitizers of the age. He demonstrates how it was done in the past with various other techniques or whatever. Anyway, I thought it was cool. I don't know if everybody's seen it or not. Probably not. I thought it was a pretty good walkthrough anyway. So I included it here.
It's cool.
So I've always kind of wanted to do this. I've even bought some equipment to do it, and even have some gel stuff to make my own filters. But I've never quite gotten around to do it because I always feel like, well, if you're going to do it, you should try to automate it somehow and use like a servo or something to rotate the filters into place, which means building some kind of mechanism, and then it falls apart from there. But I do think it'd be a cool thing to do. I'd like to have a project like that sometime. So anyway, so there's that. Next one, of course, is the first game from Jim Gary of the month. This time he's done this game called Torpedo Attack. I think it looks a bit like
Missile Command.
Yeah. For the this is for the MC10 with the MCX extension. And so for those not familiar, that's a Darren Atkinson invention that I think is also produced by
Ed Snyder.
Ed Snyder. Anyway, it adds some capabilities to the MC10 and extends the basic and gives it more memory, that sort of stuff. So anyway, it's cool that he's doing his usual thing of writing basic programs and making them available to the community. So once again, Jim, thanks and good job, and I'm sure we'll hear from you again. Okay, the next one I've got here, Python resurrects dot matrix printing. So, I don't know, printing is one of those things that's kind of a redheaded stepchild of retro computing. Some people are into it for various reasons. Some people are not. Printers are, of course, they're heavy and awkward and loud, and the consumables, the ribbons and stuff dry out and are hard to replace.
My ex-girlfriend.
But Some people still like printing. I know Mike and Neil have had some interest in printing in the past. I've messed with some of the printers that I kind of like the thermal ones because they're at least you can still get paper for them. But this project has somebody hooking up a dot matrix printer to a modern PC and using Python to drive it, which is pretty cool. And who knows, might be inspirational for someone. So, all right, very cool. Okay, next one comes from Paul Thayer. Paul has he's been programming some games, mostly in BASIC, for the CoCo 3. He did Timberman, I guess. He's got some cool projects, and does a good job with his CoCo 3 BASIC programming. And I guess one of the problems with BASIC on the CoCo 3 is you can't do page flipping using just normal BASIC commands, the way you can do different pages in just regular extended BASIC on the CoCo 2. And so I guess he's dug in a little bit and figured out that if you stick to the 128 by 96 mode, that H screen that you can draw in that, and then you can flip the buffer using the gimme registers at FF98 and FF99, and so you can still do a screen flip effect that way. So it's not terribly surprising, I guess. I mean, if you know how the machine works, that's sort of how it works, right? But I think not everybody knew that, so it's cool that he's done it and demonstrated it and made that knowledge available. So very cool, Paul. I'm eager to see what you come up with next. Let's see. Let's see the next one. Oh, so on Adafruit, announcement that you can get source code for the Furby. You remember the Furby?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So there's a kind of a goofy little. It looks almost like a gremlin or a mogwai or whatever they called them. Yeah. I think that when they came out, there was some fuss about not allowing them in office spaces for like government work because they was afraid that they would overhear something and repeat it back, like top secret information or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, apparently the brains of the Furby, much like the Terminator and Bender, is a 6502. And the source code has become available thanks to some sort of court proceeding somewhere. And it's been published through the Internet Archive and also through the website of Mr. Sean Riddle. And Sean Riddle, I've known about him for a long time because he's an arcade hacker of some note, particularly for the Williams arcade stuff. Pretty nice guy. I've exchanged some emails with him about that in the past. Anyway, so he's a good kind of preservationist in general. Anyway, if you're curious at how the Furby worked and if you're somewhat knowledgeable of 6502 source code, then it's there available for you to check out. So who wants you want to rip the guts out of a Furby and replace it with an MC10 or something? That'd be a really cool project.
I think most people just want to rip the guts out.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's right. Okay, the next one is I think a really cool project where a guy he's using the Vectrix, and we've mentioned the Vectrix before. This is a video game console that was unique because it actually included a vector monitor, and this is a monitor that works a bit like an oscilloscope in XY mode. Rather than doing the standard raster scan like so many other monitors do. So it's a little bit unique. It also happens to be powered by the 6809, so it has that in common with the CoCo. And just to tie it in a little bit more, this is a project where he's porting Forth to the Vectrix, and Forth seems to be one of those things that pops up all the time in the news in the retro world. I know there's some CoCo folks that really love Forth. So anyway, he's got there's 2 videos in the series, I think, so far. I'm hoping he'll produce some more, but he goes through the process of porting a Forth distribution that's available in source code over to the Vectrix and how you make decisions about where to put things in the memory map and how you adapt the code or whatever. It's pretty good technical talk. And so I really enjoyed it. So included here is a guy named Philip Eaton, who clearly from the UK by the sound of his accent. Yeah, so he's got a couple of videos there too. So look for part 2 when you go and watch part 1. All right. Well, that is 6 from me. So I'm going to hand the next block of 6 off to Mr. Neil. Neil, you there?
Or hand it off to Mike.
Okay, Mike, you want to go?
Sorry, someone's just at my door here. I'll be right back.
Okay.
You want me to go ahead?
Sure, why not?
Sure. Okay.
Starting with booting DW from floppy.
Okay, our next one is from Rietveld. Booting DriveWire from floppy and moving files between DriveWire and the SDC. And this is a YouTube video, which is exactly what it says. Henry's walking through the process of using DriveWire and floppies and the SDC, so worth checking out.
Yeah, I thought it's a nice little demo. I mean, it's not real in depth or whatever, but it's a demo of how it works for those that are maybe unsure of how to take that action.
Yep. And our next item is from, looks like Kita at Atari Age.
Yeah, I couldn't find a real name on that
one. Do you find yourself drifting away from the scene?
Yeah.
And,
so,
go ahead.
I mean, this could be a discussion topic. Maybe we'll have it some other time or whatever. But he raises a question. Do you find yourself drifting away? I guess it's basically a question we all probably face at one time or another. It's like, well, I like the retro stuff, but there's other things in my life. How do you stay involved, and how do you stay excited, that sort of stuff. That was a reasonable discussion.
Yeah, it is. It is. Our next one is Biorhythm by Jim Gary. This is MC10 Biorhythm program. Cool video. Check it out. Another one of Jim's creations that come out like a factory.
Yeah. Yeah. He definitely is cranking them out all the time. It's really cool to see.
And we also have another one from Jim Gary, the MC10 emulator in JavaScript. And this was pretty cool to click on that link and boom, it pops you up in a web page with an MC10 prompt.
Yeah, I don't think he wrote that one. I think he's resurrected that emulator from somewhere else and is hosting it now. But it is a cool way to be able to interact with an MC10 or play some of his programs without having to invest a lot of effort in your own MC10 setup.
Yeah, it's fun, and if you're curious about the MC10, that's a good way to toy around with it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Our next one is from Paul T. Schreiber. Today, I officially started my Tandy R&D Memoir Facebook group. Mostly true tales.
Yeah, so Paul, I guess he's been on Trash Talk, and we've seen him a lot in the Facebook. Former Tandy employee, kind of opinionated, seems to have some stories to tell. Says he's going to be working on a book, so we'll have to see when that comes out. I think he did he talk to you about some about this, Boise?
We're trying to set up a time for him to talk about. I think he has some questions about publishing. I actually interviewed Paul for the CoCo book that Bill and I did back in 2013. So,
cool.
Yeah, he had a lot of interesting folklore, which I presume will be carried on into this work.
Cool. Well, be sure to let him know. We'd be happy to have him on for an interview.
Yeah, I'm going to make my interview with him contingent on an interview with the CoCo.
Well, there you go.
That's the way to do it.
You hear that, Paul?
And our next item is 1986. This comes from the BBC archive. It's 1986. Fred Harris went behind the scenes at Infocom.
Yeah,
that's a cool video.
Yeah, very cool. It's Infocom, of course. We had an Infocom person on for an interview that was pretty popular late last year. Obviously, they did a lot of cool games back in the day, and I figure that'd be of some interest to some of our listeners. Let's see. I think that's 6. Neil, did you get back? Boise, you want to pick it up from there?
I created a little tool which has helped me repair 2 8-bit machines so far. One Z80 and one 6502. So I didn't look at this yet, John. Is this a software tool or a hardware tool, a physical
Yeah,
tool?
I think it's basically he's got a little debug monitor kind of style of program, and he's got some. I think he's got some code in there for like bit banging a serial port if you don't have a real serial port on your machine or whatever.
Mhm.
Oh, it's one of the, it's not a 6809 project, but maybe it could be, or it could be adapted. I mean, he's already adapted it to two processors. So Frank, is someone you see in some of the vintage circles. He's a VCF person, I think. So anyway, just a cool little project.
Awesome.
Just a note, I couldn't get to that link. It says it's unavailable or something.
Yeah, so it is one of those Facebook groups. I guess it's a closed group or something. But
Okay.
So on the link, he explains what the tool is,
it's not much more than what I said, but there's a short video him using it on a Sega Star Trek game.
Right.
Anyway, I wish Facebook would open those up a little more.
This next link actually is also expired, John. It says URL signature expired. We used ears for our senior engineering project back in 1989 to have a locked door open only with voice recognition. This is actually pretty cool. If you think about what we do with Siri today, right? Or your favorite voice assistant, and I have a home automation set up where I can turn off and on lights, open, close garage doors, etc., just using my iPhone with Siri. This was actually a pretty big deal to do back, almost 30 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yours was, wasn't that sold by Speech Systems?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool stuff.
So the link does work for me. It goes to the video or whatever.
Yeah, it does for me too.
So, sorry, it's a little hard to check these things, I guess. But if you can't find it, find a Facebook friend that maybe somebody else can see it.
I've got a video of demonstrating ears out on the CoCo Crew YouTube page.
Yep.
Was that a cartridge-based hardware product?
Yeah, the recognition is in hardware, and it actually had a special microphone with a preamp in it.
All right. The next item on the news list is Fourth Books. This looks like a YouTube video that just cycles through different titles for books on Fourth, correct?
Well, yeah, it's a video that shows a bunch of Fourth books, but there is a link in the notes, the comment or whatever for that video that I think you can download the PDFs.
So this is this would be something of interest for people who, like our good friend Jim, who is a Fourth Meister, or Brett, who I think also is a Fourth guy that would appreciate something like that, right?
Yep.
All right, going on to the next link here. Learning Basic like it's 1983. So this looks like a blog post by someone who's using a Commodore 64 to learn BASIC, I guess, in the here and now, because he says he was not yet alive in 1983.
Yeah, how about that?
That's cool.
Young guy, huh?
Yeah, well, so it's cool to see someone interested. And, if I had to learn BASIC again, I definitely would prefer to, knowing what I know now at least, I definitely prefer to start with the color BASIC books than any of the other ones that I've ever seen. But that's just me.
Well, that's cool. It looks like a pretty long blog post. It looks pretty detailed.
Yep.
The next item in the news is MPI PAL Upgrade by Ed Snyder. So this is a product that I presume upgrades maybe an older 3024.
Yeah, well, he does reference that Cloud9 has them available. I think he also says he has them available. But it basically just shows the process, which is not much, right? It just pop out one PAL and plug in another. But yeah,
that's a nice video if you haven't done it.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder how many multi-packs are even out there anymore.
I don't know. Yeah, multi-packs seem to be something of strange lore in the community. I've seen a post recently that people asserting that if you use the upgraded PAL with a CoCo 2 that it won't work, which I don't think is true. I've heard people say if you use the non-upgraded PAL with a CoCo 3, even if you can get it to work with whatever you're doing, that you could damage the gimme. I don't know if that's true or not. I'd like to see the reasoning that claims that. I'm not saying it's not true. I don't know why it would hurt you. I know that it's not supposed to work because you get bus conflicts or whatever. But
right. I think what they mean it might hurt the gimme is that it might be sourcing current where the gimme's trying to source current, and there might be some kind of electrical conflict.
Yeah. So I suppose it could be, but I don't know the theory on that one, but it's believable, I suppose.
Where's more lit when you need it, right?
Yeah, right.
I've only encountered one pack that had that problem on the CoCo. There was a conflict with the same address space when it was, it's one of those perfect storms. So,
what pack was that?
It was the voice synthesizer, Real Talker.
Yeah, that was a CoCo 2 product that came out in like 85 or 86. Real Talker did. Was that another speech systems product? I recall.
Don't recall if Real Talker was, or it might have become one later. I don't really remember.
I remember the ad in the Rainbow. They had those drawings of the guy and the gal's face, in the Mode 4 graphics.
Yeah, I remember that.
I think that was Real
Talker.
Voice, but
oh, maybe that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, they all had similar names.
Yeah. Okay, and the final news item for me is. Here is an incomplete prototype for the initial screen by Monsieur Hugo Dufour. This is a very cool-looking graphic screen of a game that Hugo must be working on. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it looks pretty cool. I mean, it's the colors are good. There's a good use of color there. It's hard to believe it's 16 colors.
Yeah, it's definitely good artwork. I think this is supposed to be, what was it, Kaboomerang Kim or something like that? What was the name of his game? I think it's the same one.
Yeah, and he did a redesign of the main character of the girl.
Yeah. So he's posted I think he's posted a couple of others, same game. It's cool to see that he's they're working on that. And like I said, it's definitely attractive artwork.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good.
Very cool. All right. Neil, did you ever come back?
Yes, I did. I am here. I had an unannounced customer show up and caused a real stir.
Oh. Well,
dog went ballistic upstairs. And
did you get any money in your pocket?
Yeah, I did. They paid their bills, so.
Oh, very good.
That's a good call, then.
Yeah.
All right. What do you want to pick up there from Awari?
All right, let me pick up. Okay, our next news item is from the one and only Jim Gary. And this looks like another game he has, Awari. This is another port to the MC-10.
Very cool. It's almost a joke how much this becomes the Jim Gary show during the news segments.
oh, yeah. He definitely has the most entries, I think.
Yeah, just cranks them out every month.
Now, do you guys know anything about this game? I don't.
No.
I haven't checked this one out yet. All right. I guess we'll move on to the next news item. All right. Our next news item is from Dave Phillipson.
Yeah.
Is the 6809 flawed?
Yeah.
Well, that's a question for you, John.
Well, this is in reference to the kerfuffle or whatever I mentioned earlier that got me distracted from my retro challenge project. So this was after I posted my blog entry, which there's a link in the message that we've included here. Anyway, so Dave, I guess, was a convert. He read my blog and proved it to himself that the supposed flaw was not actually a flaw. And so, anyway, I figured I had to include it in the news. I'm pretty well done talking about it. But if you read the blog post, I think you'll get the sense that I felt silly it's like defending that 2 + 2 = 4. It was kind of a dumb thing to blog about. But on the other hand, the assertion that there was an instruction that just didn't work, that you shouldn't be used, all I could picture was, 2 years from now, having somebody said, but I thought that the ASL instruction on the Motorola 689 just didn't work and you should never use it. And it's like, no. I I didn't want to have to correct that for the rest of my time. So I thought it was important to correct the record. Whether or not it's important, it was ultimately important enough to put to justify the stink. Maybe is something we could discuss or just leave to the imagination. Who knows? But anyway, so sometimes facts are important, and they're important to me. I guess this makes me a truth seeker for both the positive and negative aspects of that term.
Well, and the other nice thing is your blog was definitely informative. I mean, I sure learned a lot from it, and I think Ron was mentioning the same thing.
Well, cool. I'm glad somebody were educated by it. That's good.
All right. Our next news item is this is posted. Is it Irata online?
I think it's pronounced Irata or Irata, something like that. Yeah.
At Facebook. It's Alan Cox. That's a good buddy of yours, isn't it? Don't you know him?
Well, I do know him. I wouldn't say we're buddies, but we are, friendly acquaintances or whatever. Like I said, he was a prominent Linux person.
Yeah, I noticed that.
I used to be a prominent Linux person myself. Maybe not as much anymore, but anyway. So Alan's porting Plato term to Physics or whatever. And it seems to be making good progress since we have a Physics port for the CoCo 3 and one for the CoCo 2, I guess. I thought that was worth mentioning. That Errata Online, that Plato stuff, I guess, has gotten a lot of press in the retro world lately. It's kind of a cool system, and there's ways there to you can write online games that theoretically would be portable to a variety of systems. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
It is a neat system. I talked to Thomas on the side who kind of kicked this project off, and he's very passionate about it. He just gave another presentation at VCF Midwest. He couldn't make it to the show, so he kind of phoned it in. But it's good. He kind of goes over the history of Plato, how it got started, and then he continues on with all the new Plato clients that he's been working on. And it's been a neat project. I've used it on the CoCo 3. Brett actually wrote the first port of the Plato terminal to the CoCo 3. It works very well. It was neat to hear Alan's working on this. I haven't tried his yet. I want to, so I'll have to provide an update once I take a look at it.
Alan, of course, is like the lead guy for Physics or Physics or whatever. So, if I suspect if there becomes an official errata, port for Physics, that it would probably have to be Alan's. But I guess you never know.
All right. Our next news item is from Jamie Chow. Jamie was also at CoCoFest this past year. He gave a good presentation there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. He's a smart guy, good developer. Yeah. A little quiet, but that's okay. He did give us a talk, so that was very nice.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah. And what he's done here is he has packaged the CM3, MGE, VEF, and HRS image converters by Matthew Bouchard and Travis Pope into a single Python package that you can download from GitHub.
Yeah. Yeah, so these are the kind of oddball CoCo-specific graphics formats. I don't know if there's probably more, but there's a few of them there that it's pretty cool that because I don't think they're very well documented anywhere. Some of them may not be documented any better than the source code, even if they are documented somewhere. So I think it's good to at least preserve a way to view those images. Who knows what images are out there and how important they may be, but I think it's cool that we at least got that technique or technical ability now.
Oh, definitely.
Well, that's a good thing. I missed talking about the things that I got at VCF. Malcolm Ramey brought me 3 TND software graphics packages. They're each about 10 discs each. Cool. So I will be getting those uploaded to the Color Computer Archive in the near future.
Cool. Very nice.
All right. Our next news item is from Matthew Bouchard. And He's saying, here is a folder containing my 8 CoCo decoders written in Ruby for any Linux/OS X terminal.
Yeah, so these are kind of a pair, I guess, goes along with what Jamie did. But I think those decoders are also decoders for image formats. So, again, more preservation. That's cool.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
We need
tools.
that. Oh, I got one more.
Yep.
Our next news item is from Ed Snyder. And he posted about he has designed a mechanical keyboard for the CoCo. It looks like it's pretty much ready.
Yeah.
Some touches on it.
Yep. Well, that's cool. Well, I mean, I guess the biggest difference here is it's a complete keyboard replacement. So, it wouldn't just be retrofitting your existing keyboard. And that includes, new cherry switches, I guess. It's going to have new keycaps, too, I guess. And he appears to be engraving the keycaps legends using a laser engraver. Quite a process.
Yeah.
High tech.
Yeah,
for sure.
A lot of effort going into that. So very cool. Again, it's a weird thing for me to observe that we end up working, everybody working the same project or the same kind of projects at the same time, but get a little feedback on that a little bit, but it is what it is, right? So people scratch their itch, they want to do it, that's fine. That's cool that they share with the community. So ultimately, that's the goal. All right, so Ron, you want to pick up from there?
Sure.
Oh, another.
So our next news item is from Jim Gary. I'm actually very excited about this one. He's working with the Atari Adventure for the MC10. This was one of my absolute favorite games as a kid on the 2600. I cannot even tell you how many hours I spent on this game. And I was also excited to hear from Jim that there could be an Easter egg in this. I specifically asked about the programmer dot. I'm not sure if for folks that are old enough that have played this game, that would be a real treat to be able to see something very similar. So he's made it available for download. You can also play it in his Java emulator. Yeah. And so, John, the one thing I got to ask you is this something that can be compiled at some point in the future with your new compiler?
I hope so. It looks like that would be a reasonable thing. Still lack a few key features for that, but I would like to think that's something we might be able to do. But yeah, no, Atari Adventure definitely was a seminal game in the world of video games. Written by Warren Robinette. Oddly or interestingly enough, Warren Robinette is a professor at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. I don't know where he lives, but I suspect it's close enough I could go knock on his door.
Asking for an interview.
Yeah, well, that'd be cool. I would really like that. At one point, he was supposedly writing a book that was essentially a walkthrough of the source code for, or something like that, for the Atari 2600 Adventure. But, like so many of these projects, it at least hasn't come about yet, as far as I know. Hopefully it will. That would be really cool. He was also Warren Robinette was one of the founders of the Learning Company, where they did a couple of games that showed up on the CoCo, particularly Rocky's Boots and my personal favorite, Robot Odyssey. So a nice little bit of heritage there for that particular Jim Gary game.
Our next news item is from Paul Rickards, showing the floppy drive some love here. It looks like making DOS and CP/M 5 1/4-inch boot disks with Commodore 128 and a 1571 floppy drive.
Yeah,
I have not looked at this article yet, but it seems like there's a lot of floppy drive news lately in the retro community, and this is just another one as part of that.
Pretty cool. It's, of course, not a CoCo project, but I'd like to think it could be. And so, the standard, the 1541 Commodore floppy drive had its own built-in format or whatever. And then you could do cool things with it, but not a lot format specific. But as I understand it, this 1571 floppy drive that was paired with a Commodore 128 could do other formats, including DOS and CP/M. So interesting from that standpoint, but again, in my mind, this could be a CoCo project or something like this. I've always thought this to be a cool way when you need to make boot diskettes or diskettes of any sort. It's nice sometimes to be able to make them without having to maintain a floppy based a PC with a floppy drive. We've got CoCos with floppy drives, and it would be kind of cool if you could, using DriveWire or something like that, be able to send a diskette image down to your CoCo and have it burn, an image for your CPM or Tristos or whatever kind of machine. You probably wouldn't be able to burn one for your Apple, or probably not even for your Commodore, at least not, except for the 128 maybe. But I think that'd be a cool project, a little disk maker utility running on your CoCo. So if you're up for the challenge, if you want to compete with David Ladd for the title of Master of the Floppy, or if you're David Ladd, then maybe that'd be a cool project for you to do.
So our next news item is from Matteo Trevisan. He's got a new game. He describes it as, this is an enigma to find the hidden words adding one or more letters at a time.
So Mateo's a Retro Challenge participant, and he I don't think he was originally a CoCo guy, but he kind of picked up some CoCo stuff, probably from me talking about it related to CoCo, to Retro Challenge. So he does some CoCo projects in BASIC or whatever, and he's got a little game, it's a word guessing style, guessing game, whatever. Is it top shelf, pay top dollar for it? No, but it's a cool little game, and maybe enjoy it.
Our next news item is from Carlos Camacho. He posted a video on Facebook on how to fix stuck keys on your CoCo 2 and CoCo 3 machines. Anyone that knows Carlos and has seen some of his postings over the years, he does restorations of color computers, and it looks like he's sharing some of the techniques he uses on how to do that, including this video.
Yep, pretty cool.
All right, our next news item from Nick Marentes, Chapter 7 of his Gunstar game, the title and high score screens. Nick posted a nice blog entry on progress with his game. It looks like he's got the sound working, along with some digitized. It sounds like almost a digitized sample of a voice toward the end.
Yeah.
From an audio perspective, it looks like the game's going to use a Battlestar Galactica type theme as far as the music, and this is, of course, using his software-based player that he wrote as part of his development efforts on this game.
Yeah, so it's good to see some progress from Nick there. Like I said, his process apparently is a little bit inverted from what I think most people do, where he works on the title and the high score screens before he does the actual game itself. And that's that's the kind of thing that might be debatable in terms of if you're working on a project with Nick, but since Nick is working on the project himself, he can do it whichever damn way he wants to, and that's what he's going to do. So very cool for Nick.
Yeah, and our final news item from David Wood, code design repository for the 6809 version 2 single board computer to be released at VCF Midwest 13.
Yeah.
I did not see it. I wasn't there long enough probably to see this announcement. I see he's got the GitHub repo with information on a bill of materials for what you need to actually build the computer and some build instructions, it looks like, for the software. So this looks like a really cool project.
Yeah, I got to see it. He doesn't have any OS for it yet. He's working on that. The obvious choices, of course, would be OS 9 and or Nitrous 9 and Flex. So I think he's pretty close. He had some monitors running and had the board there. It's probably about 4 inches square with 2 serial ports on it. Kind of a cool project. It'll be neat to see this kind of mature.
Yeah, it looked great. I was impressed by the board layout.
He was actually selling the boards there, so I almost got one, but I thought maybe I'll wait a little.
You can also get it as a kit as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you feel like soldering and having a project.
Oh, so he'll provide all the components as well as the board.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Very nice.
A neat project, yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, gentlemen. That wraps up our news segment for this month. So we'll take a little break and we'll be back with some feedback.
AutoTerm turns your CoCo into the world's smartest terminal. Scroll text forward and backward. Save, load, and delete files while online. Full support for the RS-232 pack, X modem, and even split screen for packet radio. Screen widths of 32, 40, 42, 51, or 64, plus 80-column support for the CoCo 3. Switch instantly to word processing mode. Find strings instantly. Create text. Make corrections, save, or load files. Then upload them to a remote system. Fully compatible with Telewriter, plus full automation tools to automate dialing, keystroke, macros, uploading, and downloading. AutoTerm runs on the CoCo 2 and CoCo 3. No other computer can match your CoCo's intelligence as a terminal. AutoTerm from PXE Computing, Richardson, Texas.
All right, CoCo Cruisers, thanks for sticking around. Now it's time for some feedback. We've got 3 items today. First item comes from Mark J. Blair. Mark was known for doing some of the first, at least in modern times, some of the first cartridge PCBs. And he's had a few other projects in the CoCo world as well. But anyway, so he mentions me in the feedback. He says, I think that John Linville recently mentioned some confusion about why everybody seems to reinvent almost the same wheels at around the same times. I can only speak for myself, but I think that my motivation for considering doing the same thing that others have already done is that I'm more interested in doing the development than in having the result. That might also explain why I start so many more projects than I finish. Figuring out how to do it is a lot of the fun for me, but actually doing it is just hard work. I know that once I finish something, I'll probably just use it once or twice and put it on the shelf anyway. Yeah, so that's an interesting notion that maybe people talking about a project just gets other people thinking about, and maybe they've already thought about a project in the past and want to get something done before it's totally passé, or just because people are talking about it, they've been thinking about it. It's the whole scratch your own itch thing, really. And so I think that's fine. If you're excited about a project, then work on it. That's cool. Like I said, sometimes I get the feeling that some projects aren't totally motivated that way. Sometimes I feel like some of the projects are more to show that you can do it better or whatever. Maybe that's an okay motivation too, but starts to, raise some questions. I don't know. But, like I said, if you want to work on a project, then do it. It's a cool thing. It's good to have some energy in the community. And, I would not discourage anyone from working on a project that they want to do. All right, moving on, we've got one from Carlos Camacho. Says, I'm not sure if this was covered in a past episode, but I'd like to hear the host discuss the fine line between hoarding and collecting. So that's cool. That's a good subject. I don't know if we'll get to that this month or it'll be later, but I think it's a good subject to talk about. Anyway, it's nice to know that somebody likes to hear us talk. So good to have some suggestions. Sometimes it's hard to think of these things, so it's good to have a few suggestions in the air. And in that spirit, we've got Steve Bamford. Steve was the author of Flappy Bird, which came from the Dragon World, I guess. He says, across all retro communities, I reckon more projects are mothballed than reach completion. Often people target the fun stuff first, then lose motivation. Personally, I prefer to tackle the most difficult tasks first, which could decide the success or failure of the whole project. I mention all this as it might make for an interesting CoCo Crew host discussion. So there you go, somebody else who likes to hear us discuss things, so that's cool to know. And I do think that's kind of a philosophical thing when you start your project. Do you jump right into the hard part because you've just thought of a way to solve something, or do you jump into the easy parts because that's a good way to get some points on the board, so to speak? I think both approaches are valid. Whatever works for you makes sense. I don't know if that's quite the discussion we're looking for. Maybe we'll have maybe we'll save this one also for a discussion at some point. Anyway, but that's our feedback for this month. So we're going to take another break, and we'll be back with more of the show.
Okay, climbers, this is avalanche country, so let's keep it quiet. So what have you been up to lately? Oh man, I've been having a blast with my TRS-80 Model 3 and 4. What's making it so fun? I've added the M3 SE from Bartlett Labs. What's that? It's the Model 3 system expander. It gives you solid-state hard drives on compact flash, Ethernet, a real-time clock, and you can connect an SVGA monitor. That's incredible! Sorry. It also has an Atari 2600 compatible joystick port. You can play games like never before. Wow! Sorry. It works with the Model 3, 4, 4D, and 4P. The 4P can even automatically boot from a hard drive image. Where can I get one? Get carried away with your TRS-80 Model 3 or 4 with the Model 3 System Expander. Visit bartlettlabs.com for details and pricing.
Enter a world of decadence. Drenched in rich, dazzling neon color. The TRS-80 color computer. Only available at Radio Shack. Display dazzling graphics. Choose from a rich palette of colors including magenta, cyan, and buff. Decadence. Get your own 4K TRS-80 color computer for just $399. Get 16K for just an additional $119 more. Experience the bold world of color. Decadence. Only at Radio Shack.
All right, welcome back, CoCo Cruisers. So after much contentious debate, we've decided to tackle Carlos's topic on the difference between hoarding and collecting. And so I think the subject mostly speaks for itself, but just as a little intro, I think many of us have been through this dilemma, perhaps, that you start out and you buy, or maybe even you just are given something, or even just collect something from your own childhood, from your parents' house or whatever, and then you realize that something is broken or something is missing, or that you just would really like to have something else, and you acquire, the game or a joystick or something like that, and then that's leads to another thing, and maybe there's something else you want to get, and of course that's part of a package deal, and so you pick up the package, and it includes an extra CoCo 2 and an MC10 and some books. And then one of the books is really cool, and you read that, and you pick up another retro book that's related, and it started out with a banker's box full of a CoCo and a couple of things, and then suddenly you've taken over a corner of your room or a closet or an entire room, or you're renting storage space offsite. And so a lot of us, you hear this a lot in the retro community, is like, well, at what point do you cease being a collector and start being a hoarder? I think Retro Computing Roundtable recently had a similar discussion. I think they threw in a third option, which was a museum, which I'm not sure. I guess that was somewhere between being a collector and being a hoarder. So I don't know. Where do you think the lines are? I mean, obviously, if you only have a few things, you can probably safely call yourself a collector. Probably, the obvious line. The obvious line when you start hoarding things is when you buy things that you have no actual personal interest in. You just want to make sure that you owned it. Or if you've got a big pile of things, and when you start digging in the pile, you find dead animals or something like that. But probably you you probably cross the line to being a hoarder somewhere before that. in general, I think probably when your collection comes something that does more to make you unhappy than to make you happy is probably or at least when it starts to make you unhappy, is probably the start of the line. I don't know. What do you think? Who should I pick on? Boise, you got any opinions on this?
Well, as someone who has done a lot of hoarding in my past, I think that there is a point where you get too much. I'm at that point right now where I've got lots of CoCos, and at some point you have to start thinking about offloading what you've got. I'd say probably have about maybe 30, 40 CoCos. Seriously, that's a lot, right?
Yeah. You have your tower of CoCos. I've seen that.
yeah, that's right. So then you start asking yourself, okay, what is it that I can do to justify having this much equipment, right? The Tower of Power is a project that I haven't gotten to because I've been so busy with other things, but it's something I'd like to eventually do. So, there's also the idea, am I hoarding too much of something that maybe the rest of the community needs, right? Do I have too many multi-packs? Do I have too many cassette recorders, CCR81s, right? So, for me, I got to a point in my collection where I was trying to get one variety of different type of CoCo. And on a CoCo, too, you're talking about, 7 or 8 different serial numbers, and there are variations to some degree in case badges. So there's collecting and trying to get sort of a unique piece of every sample, right? One piece of every sample that's out there or kind. And then there's just like going crazy on eBay because, there's a great sale right now on, people are giving away CoCo 2s at one point or another. And you just hate to see them go to waste. So, that's kind of my take on it. You can't have too much. I probably have too much. If something were to happen to me, my wife wouldn't know what the hell to do with everything. She'd probably have to call John Linville or Mark Marlette and try to get them right to come in.
That's my plan for mine.
Yeah. You mentioned that. There for a while, it seemed like when an MC10 would turn up, it would, you sell them complete in box for $10 with the memory upgrade. Yeah. And I bought several like that just because I didn't want to see them go into the landfill.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And I don't know, I think that's one thing that probably a lot of us could rest a little easier nowadays is that retro stuff in general, at least people are a little more attuned to the notion that some of it has value. So it's a little bit less likely to just be thrown away, depending on what it is. Now, that said, I'll pick something that's a little obscure. If somebody happens to have a stash of A-Bus expansion cards, A-Bus was an extension that you could get for the CoCo and also for a variety of other machines back in the day. Most people would have no idea other than the fact that it's some old computer junk. Whereas, if they happen to call me and say, I've got a bunch of A-Bus cards, do you want them? And say, okay, how far away are you? Do I have to drive? Or, I would, I've got several A-Bus cards, but I'd like to have more if there were any available. So, keeping your collection focused is probably a key to some degree to not getting too far out of control. There's only so many models of CoCo, even though there's more than you might expect. So you get to the 3136B or the, the 30, whatever, the different serial numbers and the French version and that sort of stuff. But there is a limit at some point, so I used to I kind of keep myself in control that way but then it was like, well, this is sort of related, or I have a relationship to that. Like my grandparents had an Intellivision. So at some point I broke and bought an Intellivision and then justified that because there was a Tandyvision. So that was kind of related to the CoCo and to me personally. And then it's like, well, I've got the Intellivision. there's this other kind of weird game console from back in the day. Maybe I can move over to that and get some of that stuff. And, that's sort of, that when my pile started to get a little too big. Neil has seen some of my pile, and it's not quite like Smaug, or Smog, however you want to say it. But if I could, lay down in it, roll around on it without breaking any of it, I would. So I don't know. I think that one thing I've said is, if you have a reasonable chance of finding stuff that you've got, then maybe it's not a hoard. Maybe it's still a collection. Right. The problem, I guess, is sometimes my collection is big enough that sometimes I forget things that I've got. I'm probably not the only one who's bought something only to discover that they had already bought the same thing 2 years prior. But I don't have too much of that. I do have. I could use a lot more space, but I don't know. Like I said, if it gets to the point where you've got dead animals in your pile, or if if your pile is covering up excretions from animals or that sort of thing, then that's definitely a problem.
Well, I feel better because I'm doing all right then.
Well, unfortunately for people like Simon, he had that bug infestation a while ago. I don't know if he's a hoarder, but that's a terrible thing to hear.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was more of a one-off thing, I think. But that can happen, especially. Yeah, I'm not sure where he had his stored, if that was part of it, or if it just was unfortunate. I don't know. I'm not sure there's a clear demarcation. Well, what about did any of you guys ever thought, well, I'm going to turn all this into a museum?
That's a good point. Oh, go ahead, Neil.
No, I was just going to say that's always been a dream of mine, but kind of like a pipe dream, but I don't think it'll ever happen.
Yeah, I've heard people say that, but more like they're fishing for a justification or whatever. I don't imagine that my stuff will ever make much of a museum. Partly because I'm not really a museum quality collector. I don't care as much about how things look sometimes. People go to a lot of trouble to retrobrite things, and it's like, oh, it's a little yellow, but that's how they look, or at least how they look after you let them hang out a while. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I don't view myself so much as a collector because I'm not worried about having this or that. I mean, there are things that we want, but I want them so I can use them. I don't want them so I can, it's not like collecting Star Wars figures where they're going to stay in the package so they can maintain their mint condition or anything like that. And sometimes I've done a couple of things retrobriting just to kind of experiment with it, but I'm the same way. My workhorse systems are really the ones that are in the worst shape because I don't have to worry about hurting them.
Yeah.
The covers always come off, the screws are out of them, so I can open it up and do something with it quickly. So, the ones I use, I don't have to worry about what they look like at all.
And of course, that's part of what I love about the CoCo is so many of them in original condition. They don't have any screws, or somebody's drilled holes for a fan, or
yeah,
or added the LEDs or something to them, and that's part of the fun when you get one is sometimes figuring out what in the world is this modification? Why did they make that? How does it work? That sort of thing. So yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not totally clean hands on this as I look out over my pile. I know it. I can't totally just stand up and say, no, I'm not a hoarder. It's definitely there are people who would see my pile and just say, nope, you're a hoarder. But,
it's all just a matter of degree, right?
Yeah, well, my wife would definitely think I'm a hoarder. She's my check and balance, absolutely. She's got her hobbies too. But, you guys bring up a funny point about, a museum type of situation. I guess I look over everything and I'm like, well, can I charge admission to my basement? Because that's what I would know. It would that may be the thing I use to measure against. But for me, I didn't want to become a hoarder. I'm not saying I am, but you have your CoCos and things like that, and I like to use them, like Mike had said, and then with some of the new hardware projects and upgrades and things, you want to have one that you can do that to. But then I'd also like to at least keep something that is more or less stock, that's a good baseline. And by the time you start looking at a CoCo 2, CoCo 3, MC10, and if you have an extra one of each of those, so you can do hardware upgrades too. And then finally, you may have an extra one of each of those just because you don't know if you can get another one if it breaks, if it needs to be repaired.
Right.
So you can easily have triple the number of machines just with those. I say simple scenario, but it adds up. So
yeah, definitely. But I think Boise raised a good point too. Is that are you acquiring things, just because? Well, just because, I guess. Oh, or are you acquiring them because they're interesting, or that you perceive some actual need for them? I mean, need, of course, is a relative term. Nobody needs to be doing this stuff, or if there is anybody who needs retro computers, I would really love to talk to them. But I don't know. It's like Boise mentioned the MPIs, the multi-packs, which do seem to be they're a little bit on the rare side, at least in terms of versus demand. People seem to want them more than there exists supply for them. I think, I think most people will probably figure out that they didn't need them that badly. Although I saw where, Rebuild had a video he posted just like today about how he really needs 5 slots for his MPI or whatever, because he's putting a floppy controller and a CoCo SDC and a Super IDE all in at the same time. It's like, well, those kind of overlap in functionality. Do you really need all of that? But I don't know. No, it'd be remiss of me not to mention, if I'm talking about people, hoarding particular items, I do have a flair for collecting the program pack files. That's been kind of a running joke between me and Vincent Tran, and I think he's claiming to be done now. I passed up buying the last one I saw on eBay, so maybe I'm done. Maybe it was just too expensive.
The healing beginning.
But I do have a nice little stack of them, including one in a box. Kind of cool. But, the only thing you really hoard is the thing that lets you stack up and organize your other stuff. Maybe that's not so bad either. Right?
It's the organizing your hoard.
Yeah, exactly. But
I just like to chime in for a quick second here. There's one other aspect of this hobby that I think, it comes down to collecting and hoarding is, we've reached that age where we can now afford this stuff.
Sure.
Back in the day, we could only basically have one platform, and I know myself, like I kind of go off on these tangents of, I couldn't afford an Amiga back in the day, or I couldn't have an Atari ST. So like now you end up snapping up all the stuff, and it's like, well, do you have the time to use it?
Well,
that's a bit of the issue, right?
Time is an issue. I hope to retire someday, and I hope to retire. Well, I hope to retire at least a little bit early, but I guess that depends on a lot of things.
There's definitely an opportunity and cost involved.
Sure.
When you see some of this rare stuff, you're like, well, I better get this. I don't have time to do anything with it now, but if I don't get it now, when I do have time, I'll never be able to find one again.
And that's exactly right.
Yeah. You end up shelving it for a little bit.
Well, and so along those lines, I was going to say, one of my things that probably has motivated my pile to be bigger than it probably should have been is, I do write software for some of these old machines, and not just the CoCo, and I do have kind of a not so secret plan or wish that I'd like to write something significant for, basically a whole slew of machines, covering, basically sort of all the standard retro platforms and a few not so standard ones. And so, at least until I write that software, at least until I write that Vectrix program, then I've still got a reason to keep Vectrixes around, other than the fact that they're cool to begin with. until I write that Commodore 64 version of Farfall, I've got reasons to have a Commodore 64 around. That sort of thing. Now, I hope I didn't just enable somebody to become a bigger hoarder than they otherwise would have been. Don't send me your eBay bill for sure. But,
the only thing I would ask John is to let us know when that software, just before it becomes self-aware, because it sounds like it's going to take over everything if that happens. So.
Well, it might be. You never know. But, Boise's the machine learning guy, so he's more dangerous than I am.
And also to elaborate more on what Ron was mentioning about the scarcity and of keeping these things running, having duplicates and triplicates of everything, I kind of have a problem with that. Even before I got in this hobby, I've always been known to have doubles of everything. Got two of the same retro cars, and same with these computers. But yeah, it comes a point. It's like, you got to ask, or I got to ask myself, like, this stuff might be hard to get, but you can get it again. Like it's not unobtainium. Well, maybe most of it isn't.
Yeah, well, and so, it's kind of at what cost and how much effort and how patient are you going to be in the future. And like you said, some of it might be completely unobtainable, but do you really need it to begin with?
Exactly.
What really helps with this, and Neil, I'm the same way with a lot of stuff like that. But what really helps with this is people like, I'm not trying to plug Mark here, but he dedicates a lot of his time at these shows to helping fix people's machines, and there's other folks that do that as well.
Exactly.
At the shows, and that is a great service that is provided by folks like him. So you can have maybe one of something and know that, unless it's maybe a gimme chip or something, that a lot of times you can bring it to someone like Mark and he can fix it. I mean, there's going to be a cost at some point, especially
right.
What kind of parts you need. But at least you know that, as long as Mark's in the hobby and he remains in the community, people like him are there to help.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, does that cover the topic or beat it to death? Well, all right. Well, then we'll call this, we'll say this is resolved. Man law. And I don't know. It's certainly ripe for feedback. I'd love to hear what other people think. Is there a clear line between collecting and hoarding? Is there a place for the would-be museum in there? What is that? I guess one thing I heard them say on the Retro Computing Roundtable was if you've documented your stuff, if you've kind of written up a little blog or not a blog, well maybe a blog, but if you've got like this CoCo belonged to Marty Goodman and he did this mod on it on 1983 and used it as a basis for this article in the Rainbow. Stuff like that. That could be part of a museum at some point, right? Maybe the world's most smallest museum or whatever, but it could be. I don't know if anybody's really doing that. I suspect not. But maybe that's a little bit different.
If you're going to get feedback on this, I'd be curious for people like maybe Michael Brandt or even Henry and maybe even Ron to chime in, because they seem like they have sizable collections.
Yeah.
Might be a good roundtable discussion.
That's true.
I mean, those are just three off the top of my head, but they sure seem like they have a pretty good stash of equipment, especially CoCo or maybe Tandy equipment.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I've always thought it's odd how some people it seems like they just walk out the door and stumble across piles of CoCo stuff and things, they'll come up with things that I didn't even know existed. And it's like, how did you find something I didn't even know it existed? And I haven't found a CoCo thing in the wild in years. And it's just they're somehow in the right place or whatever. That Glenn Vandebigler, rest in peace. He seemed to always be able to find piles of stuff, and then it's like, well, how was he? And he lived like kind of in the middle of nowhere, is my impression,
with no car.
How did he get? So whatever happened to all his inventory? Did his family distribute that? Then did they donate it? Did someone collector come in and buy it all?
I can only speculate, but my speculation would not be very positive. But
Yeah, you would hate to hear that all went to a landfill. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
I don't know, but anyway, so I guess that's another thing that we'll have to say for the future is how do some people just fall into stuff constantly, and where are all the where are all the former collectors that gave up but haven't distributed their stuff, and then how do we get their phone number? Anyway, if you happen to be a CoCo person that's not too active but does have a big collection, and you'd like to make sure that it goes to people who love it, do write in and let us know who you are, and we'll do what we can to make sure it gets to people who will do it justice. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Fair enough. All right. Well, thank you guys for another lovely discussion. We're going to call this one to a close, and probably got a few more tidbits for the rest of the show, so do stay tuned.
Thank you for calling the CoCo Crew Podcast Hotline. To hear about CoCo Fest, press or say 1 now. To hear about Tandy Assembly, press or say 2 now. Tandy Assembly will be held November 10th and 11th, 2018, in Springfield, Ohio. This year's keynote speaker is the host of the popular PBS show, The Computer Chronicles, Stuart Chaffee. Visit www.tandyassembly.com for details. To hear Neil Blanchard review a game, press or say 1 now. To hear Boise Pete discuss Nitrous 9, press or say 2 now. To hear Ron Klein review emulators, press or say 3 now. To hear John Leanville sing, press or say 4 now.
Go, you don't have to boot up OS 9. Now that we're older, we like to play deck B games, they're alright. CoCo.
Floppy drives, hard drives, real-time clock.
RS-232 pack, game cartridges. I'm sick of constantly plugging and unplugging things into my CoCo. Eliminate wear and tear of your CoCo's expansion port with a BT2000 companion from Basic Technology. Load up to 5 cartridges and enjoy the benefits of push-button selection. Load up to 5 cartridges and enjoy the benefits of push-button slot selection. Each slot has its own indicator light. You'll know at a glance which cartridge is in use. And no more turn-offs. Switch to the next cartridge and press a button to restart without turning power on and off. Enjoy years of trouble-free operation. We use only top-quality components, and all our products include a 180-day parts and labor warranty. Save your CoCo's expansion port and enter a world of push-button simplicity. The BT2000 Companion from Basic Technology. Right for our free brochure. Basic Technology, Ortonville, Michigan.
Hello, CoCo Cruisers. This is John Linville, and welcome to the tech segment for episode 40. So, as longtime listeners and community members will know, I in particular, and maybe some of the others in the crew here, are fans of putting games on cartridges. It's a kind of a very 80s thing, in my opinion, and it's a cool way to be able to just slam in a cartridge and turn on a game and not have to worry you'd take time to type in commands and load off a disc or a cassette, and not have to worry about keeping a cassette in shape or a disk drive working. But some people don't seem to share the affinity, and I'm not sure why, but I think they perceive some weaknesses. Or maybe they just think the computers are better and they don't like comparing the CoCo to a game machine. I don't know. Anyway, certainly is a computer, whether you put a cartridge in it or not. So, anyway, back to perceived downsides or whatever. One thing that gets pointed out to me or thrown back at me when I try to convince people that they should consider putting their games on cartridges is the notion of the save game, and whether it's actually saving game status or just saving high score tables, or I don't know what else would be in between, but maybe saving character attributes or something like that. It's always the notion of wanting to write something. And the perception for some reason is if you don't load off of cassette or whatever, then you can't save to it. That's something I don't get. I think I may have covered in another topic somewhere the various ways I can think of that you might still save games. If not, I'll just recap that, plugging in the cartridge does not disable the cassette port. You can still save through the cassette port out either to an actual cassette or to your cell phone using one of those cables like I talked about last month. For that matter, you could still save to a diskette if you have a multi-pack with a diskette drive or CoCo SDC or whatever plugged in. And, kind of a third option there, if you've got the appropriate cable plugged in, you can still save out to DriveWire. All of those are none of those are perfect, or none of them I think feel quite right to people. And so there's always the notion that if you want to save at all, at least your cartridge should have some means of doing so. And a lot of people are kind of spoiled by the NES cartridges from the 80s that could save stuff, and later cartridges while they lasted that allowed you to have save games on the cartridge. Now, a lot of those were actually battery-backed little RAM chips or whatever. At least as I understand it. But still, it'd be kind of nice if we could build cartridges that had some level of storage in them. And I'll stress we do not actually have this yet, or at least as far as I know, nobody's doing it. Now, so you can go the other way, and you could build a cartridge around full-blown flash chips, and so you could argue, well, that's what CoCo Flash is, and that's what, so there are a couple other examples of people with flash chips that you could write to in software. And that's fine, but not exactly what I was looking for. What I would be looking for as a publisher of games. You still want to cut the cost of the hardware. And, it kind of holds you back from putting any storage on there. But if you are going to put some storage on there, you probably don't want to, triple the price or whatever. You don't necessarily want to put a lot of extra hardware on there for more storage and for all the address decoding and whatever to enable the storage. So where does that leave us? Well, it turns out there are a couple of main options that are quite useful for providing some level of storage on a variety of computer projects around the world, shall we say. Basically they involve small chips, like little 8-pin dips, attached to a form of a serial bus. And usually the chips themselves are fairly cheap, at least in certain sizes. You're talking about 40 or 50 cents a piece. And then you still have a little bit of problem of exactly how you're going to interface to them, and that's sort of what this discussion is about. But anyway, so there's kind of two main contenders for these serial buses. There's what's called commonly called SPI or SPI for I think serial peripheral interface, and then there's you'll see it as IIC or as I2C, or sometimes as I with an actual superscript like a mathematical square, so I squared C. That's a little engineer math person joke. When it's I-C, it's kind of like I times I, so I squared, get it? So I usually call that I squared C or I2C. The funny part about the abbreviations is they don't actually save. You don't save any space by saying I2C versus IIC. And if anything, I squared C seems like you're going a little bigger. Anyway, so there's I squared C, which stands for Inter-Integrated Circuit Bus, I think is where that came from. I squared C was invented by the company Philips, and back in the maybe even the late 70s or definitely early 80s, somewhere in there. SPI, it's a little harder to pin down, but it came out of Motorola in the early 80s, something like that. So they're both kind of retro technologies, even though they probably don't quite seem that much. So anyway, they are both serial buses, and so you say serial, people think of serial port like RS-232, and they are not that. The main thing being, in both cases, they are synchronous, which means they actually have a clock signal as part of the protocol, the bus protocol, whereas RS-232 is famously asynchronous, meaning that you can sort of start transmitting at any given time, and the other side has to kind of figure out that you're transmitting and keep time on its own to make sense of it. Yeah, so let's give just a little overview of the differences in the protocols. So SPI is kind of more closely associated with microcontrollers, maybe. I don't know, certainly with the Motorola microcontrollers. They're both kind of microcontroller favorites, shall we say. But the SPI, Motorola started putting SPI logic into their microcontrollers, the 68HC11 or whatever, quite a long time ago. And so there's a lot of stuff that kind of used it, but SPI is not actually an official standard, so to speak. There's nowhere to go look up an official standard for it. There's lots of places that'll tell you how it works. But so it turns out there's some variations related to when the clock, where the clock is normally, when it's resting, shall we say, and, which edge of the clock is important for reading the data. So there's at least 4 variations there, I guess. And then I think there's also variations that, we'll get to in a minute, that there's different numbers of pins that can be used, different numbers of signals, shall we say. But in general, the general SPI standard, you have now, if you're a politically sensitive or social justice warrior or whatever type person, prepare yourself. We're going to use the terms master and slave. We're not talking about human beings. We're talking about pieces of electronics. So, please be prepared. Anyway, with SPI in general, you have 2 signal lines, and one's called MOSI for master out, slave in, and then there's one called MISO for master in, slave out. Now, these names are supposed to help you easily keep clear the kind of directions of the transfers. But so you have those 2 lines, plus you have a clock line, which is serial clock or something like that. And then in general, on top of those, so those 3 go to all the devices that you might have that are SPI on the SPI bus, shall we say. And then if you do have multiple ones, if you're not just a single thing, you typically have also a chip select line for each potential SPI device you want to talk to. So it's sometimes called a 3-wire interface, sometimes called a 4-wire interface. Of course, it leaves off ground, so it's really 5 wires. So the basis is the master will control the clock, and so he'll flip the clock when he's got data ready to send. He'll start flipping the clock for say 8 bits for a byte. And these go out a shift register, so they go out the master out, slave in line to communicate to the slave. Now, simultaneously, with the same clock cycle, if the slave had anything to send back to the master, he's flipping bits in the other direction, so that's the master out, slave in, and so you effectively have a full duplex transfer. Now, in reality, depending on how things are running, you may not have useful information going in both directions. Because, for example, if you're using an SPI-based flash or EEPROM device, you're going to write out, say, an address to say, I want to read this address, or a command, say, I want to read, and then this address. And obviously he's not ready to send you the data for that address until he knows that you're reading that address. So while you're sending out those first command or whatever, he's basically just sending you back junk or zeros or whatever. And it depends on the exact kind of device, but I would think it'd probably be zeros for the average EEPROM device until he gets the actual data. And then as you continue to read, even if you're really only interested in the data coming out, you still have to pump something back to him and while you're working the clock, which may effectively just be zeros or whatever. So the point being is, while it's technically full duplex, you're not necessarily sending useful data in both directions. But so you have this dual shift register kind of set up with a clock, and that's SPI. Now the other option that's equally popular, maybe more popular, probably depends on your perspective. Again, is this I2C or I2C or IIC? Most people say I2C. That is a 2-wire interface. It's really 3 because of ground, right? You have a serial data line and a serial clock line. And those two go, plus ground, of course, go to all the devices on the bus. There is no chip select line in the I2C. But instead, when you want to reference a device, you actually end up sending an address byte first. And that the address, well, actually the last bit that you send it with the address frame, or I guess they call it, you'll send the device address plus 1 bit that either defines read or write. And so everybody's listening until they get their address in, and they say, okay, that's not me, or that is me, and the one device that it is will answer back. So that means if you're implementing an I2C bus, you have to be aware of how your devices are getting addressed, and so make sure you don't have multiple devices with the same address. And so usually what you'll have is, like, if you have a sensor, like a temperature sensor or something like that, it'll have part of its address predefined, or an EEPROM, a memory chip, something like that. It'll have part of its address predefined, say the first 4 bits, 3 bits, something like that. And then it'll usually have a few bits that are customizable based on the installation. So usually, on the actual circuit board, you'll have grounded lines or pull-up lines that kind of define the extra bits. And so if you have 2 of the same kind of chip, it's okay that they had, they're pre-programmed for part of the address, and then you set the specific bits for the rest of the address. So anyway, the addressing is in software, when you go to do your write. And the clock, again, comes back from the master, so, the chief device, the CPU or whatever that's driving the I2C bus will control the clock. And there is a mechanism in I2C that a slow device can stretch the clock if it needs to take extra time. I don't know how common that is these days, and certainly at the speeds you'd be running with a CoCo, you probably wouldn't have the devices doing much of that, but I guess you never know. But yeah, so software-wise, or as far as the actual protocol, that's pretty much the big difference. And if you're going to bit bang the protocols, you'd need to know these things. And so there's specific things like there's framing signals in I2C, start and stop conditions that are essentially when they come when you handle the clock and data transitions in a different way, so that they it's data before clock and instead of or clock before data instead of data before clock. Anyway, there's if you're at the timed bit level, you can determine the difference between regular signaling and the start a frame, and end a frame signaling, and there's an ACK. This is that the sender knows if the receiver actually claims to have received the bits. If you're going to do that in software, you'd have to know all those things. I did implement an I2C bit bang driver for, I think, a MIPS CPU in a former life. It's not that bad. And again, if instead of doing the I2C, you're doing the SPI, you'd have to, be aware of driving the clock and then, shifting the bits out and shifting the bits in at the same time. So if for every clock, you need to not only write your bit out, but read your bit in. And you need to be aware of which variation, of your device. So should your clocks be resting high or resting low? Does your data change before your clock shift? Does your data change, when the clock goes high versus when the clock goes low? That sort of thing. Anyway, so those are all concerns from a software perspective, and plus, like I mentioned before, from a hardware perspective, for I2C, if you're gonna need to add, you're gonna need to have two wires for to access the actual memory device. For SPI, you've got 3 or maybe 4. Along with ground. And we're talking about putting these inside of a cartridge. From a hardware perspective, just the protocols themselves, I'm not sure it makes much difference. Extra couple of lines, I don't know, not really a big difference. In terms of the devices, the prices of the storage devices themselves, again, I don't see a huge difference. I don't really have it up in front of me now, but you're talking about probably less than $1 for the storage, in either way you go, and pretty much as big as you want to go. So then the question comes, well, how are you actually going to implement the access to the device, right? Well, so like I said, Motorola added SPI bus, and probably some of the microcontrollers these days may even have I2C bus. Certainly other microcontrollers like PIC or AVR will tend to have I2C available, or SPI. They probably have both available, depending on which microcontroller you buy. But we're not dealing with microcontrollers. We're dealing with the CoCo and the 6809. And there are no, by default, GPIO pins just hanging off. There's certainly none defined for the cartridge port itself. If you want I/O pins, you've got to add them, right? So what we thought was, a draw on hardware, just add the 8-pin memory chip or whatever, plus a few pins here or there. Well, now, depending on which way you go, you need a different set of hardware. And if you're going to bit bang stuff, then you don't necessarily need a full PIA. That's just kind of a big chip to put on a cartridge. But you need something that does have, that will allow you to write values out at least 2 or 3 bits, and read back at least a 1 serial bit. So you're adding 2 or 3 or 4 different chips. And if you've seen the inside of the Game Master cartridge, it's not totally full, but it's not exactly abundant with space in there for adding stuff. So what do you do, right? Well, so what typically would be done, say if you were one of the other prominent hardware vendors for the CoCo, that narrows it down a little, but not that much, is most of those guys typically use some kind of programmable logic chip to begin with, right? A CPLD or an FPGA. I have largely, I just really haven't got there, and I'm kind of still would prefer to explore more vintage tech for the hardware that I do. So the cards I've designed all have, pin through hole, 74 series logic, old stuff. So I don't have a CPLD. And if you do go adding a CPLD, not only do you typically have to go to more modern fabrication techniques, for surface mount stuff or whatever. Then you also typically, depending on what you pick, is you're going to need voltage conversions and such, because modern chips run at different voltages than what the CoCo does, and so that might be its own set of extra chips to add. And so suddenly, you're adding a whole big circuit just to add a little bit of storage. So this kind of sounds like a pain in the butt. Now, it looks like to me that if you wanted to implement SPI yourself, if you could go with a couple of shift registers, basically one for reading and one for writing, and you probably could use a PAL. Maybe not. It might get a little complicated, but you probably could use a PAL for implementing the clocking, and then maybe you'd have enough room left over in the PAL to do some of the address decoding, so that might free up some of the space on the board that you were using for that. And so you end up, you'd have to add a couple of chips to the board. Maybe you can take a chip or two away from the board. You kind of get a net gain of a couple of dips. Dips on, that's what they call the packages for the chips, the old 74 series logic chips and that sort of thing. So you add a couple of dips, and maybe you have enough hardware there to do the SPI. I've seen designs that you could basically reduce it to just the software would be pretty easy. You read and write to an address. Maybe there's an extra address for kicking off the clock, that sort of thing. It's doable, and so maybe I'll do it at some point. On the other hand, for I2C, again, that was an invention of Philips Semiconductor. Well, at some point in the past, Philips actually did have a chip that you could get, the PCF 8584, and then there was another one that did kind of a similar job that came a little later. But anyway, the point of that chip is it takes a normal kind of CPU style parallel bus interface and actually implements I2C for you, and you can, when you do your write, there's just a command register or whatever, you can write bits to that'll generate your start and stop signals, and then you write out your data, and it takes care of clocking things out for you. And so that's really not that bad. It doesn't look like a hard design to use. Now, of course, the downside is, they've been obsolete. The chips are obsolete for like 15 years or something, maybe just 10. I do find it doesn't seem like it's impossible to find them, and they cost $1 or $2, and so you get that $1 or $2 of that chip, and another 50 cents or $1 maybe for the I2C EEPROM, and you can put them on. So you're talking about a couple of chips, and it's not that much PCB space. And because it takes care of the I2C protocols for the most part, the software that you have to use to access these devices is not too complicated. And we're talking about probably a few hundred, maybe even a few dozen bytes of code. Granted, you're not going to be running. You don't want to run it all the time because the clocking is a little on the slow side for clocking bits into and out of the memory. But unless you're going to run a data logger, which I guess you probably could do depending on how much data you need. But if you're using it to save high scores for a video game, then you're not going to need to run it that often anyway. So there you go. That's sort of this is contemporaneous speaking here, and I don't have any notes, but here's my offhand remarks on what it takes, what it will take to add some storage to a cartridge for the CoCo, Like I said, it takes a little bit of real estate. It's going to take a dollar or two, maybe $3 added to the bill of materials. So a little bit of extra space on the PCB. I don't think it's going to make the PCBs themselves any bigger because they're already filling the cartridge anyway. So that's the biggest price determiner in the PCB itself is actually the size of the PCB. So PCB size price should stay about the same. The parts will cost an extra $1 or $2. A little bit more pain in the butt trying to find them because, like I said, that one part is obsolete for 10 years or something. But like I said, it still seems to be available. And if for some reason it doesn't work out, I think we still could probably implement SPI. Well, certainly the guys using CPLDs can do it. I think I could probably do it using, like I said, a PAL maybe, without adding too much extra hardware. And so they could give us an extra. So how much memory are you talking about? Well, 32K, 64K, maybe more. Not an overwhelming amount of memory in those serial EPROMs. They do have some that get bigger than that, I know, but even kind of the small, cheap ones, if you're saving high scores, you can save a lot of high scores in 16K, right? And if you're saving game state, well, you're still talking about a significant chunk of the entire CoCo memory. Hopefully you can save whatever state you need from the game in that amount of space. And like I said, this isn't the only option. You plug in the cartridge, the cassette port's still there. If you're using a multi-pack, then the diskette storage or STC or whatever can still be there. And if you have the serial port plugged in, then you can still store the drive wire. So those are still options too. My point being, if you like games and you think you might want to do a cartridge, but you want to be able to store, high scores or game state or whatever, all is not lost. So I am experimenting with circuits for I2C EPROMs right now. So there, I've said it. I'm working on an I2C EPROM design, so I guess now that triggers every other designer, a hardware guy in the CoCo community to have to go do one. If you haven't been listening to the rest of the podcast, that's a little joke I've got going now. Anyway, I guess that's pretty much all I've got to say on the issue, so we're going to call this one a wrap. CoCo forever. Keep on riding in the free world, or keep on rocking in the free world, something like that. Anyway, all right, CoCo Cruisers, this is John, and I'm out. Bye.
It's time again. It's time to learn. It's time to connect. People from across the globe will travel to one place to celebrate. It's time to assemble. Tandy Assembly is North America's only vintage computer show dedicated exclusively to all makes and models of Tandy and Radio Shack computers. Last year was our inaugural show and the response has been phenomenal. Thanks to your attendance and donations, this year will be even better. This year, Tandy Assembly is being held in Springfield, Ohio, just 30 minutes from Dayton International Airport. Our keynote speaker will be Stuart Chaffee, host of PBS's The Computer Chronicles. Events and hotel information are available at our website, tandyassembly.com. Registration is just $10 per person. Children 12 and under are free. And as always, you can register and pay online. Some assembly is required. Join us on November 10th and 11th in Springfield, Ohio for Tandy Assembly. The CoCo is a powerful computer, and the multi-pack enables you to expand with RS-232, floppy controller, and hard disk drives. But don't you think your CoCo would be a lot nicer without all of the mess hanging off the right side? Of course it would.
The Connect Expander replaces the lower half of your CoCo case and allows mounting two SCS-decoded devices like a floppy and hard drive controller inside of your CoCo. The Expander board includes a 12-volt power supply and provides a built-in no-slot RS-232 port. The external cartridge slot is still available for game cartridges or additional hardware. The Expander kit is just $124.95, or you can purchase just the board alone for just $99.95. It's great for repacking a CoCo in a PC case. The Expander from Connect, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
All right, CoCo Cruisers, welcome to our community roundtable for fall of 2018. The autumn, or whatever you like to call it, has just started, and we thought we'd get a group of CoCoists together and sort of talk about what's happening in the community, things that are good or bad, how healthy is the community, that sort of thing. So we've invited, of course, we've got a couple of our normal hosts here. We've got, of course, me, John Linville, and we've got Mike Rowan. Hi, Mike.
Hello.
And Ron Klein. Hi, Ron. Hey, Ron Klein. Hello.
Oh, I said hello, I thought. Sorry.
I didn't hear it. Also, we're joining us. We've got Brendan Donahue, the minds behind CoCo VGA. All-around nice guy. Hi, Brendan.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
We've got the true mastermind behind CoCo Talk. We've got Grant Leedy. Hi, Grant.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Notice he doesn't deny it. And then we've got the community mascot, Ron Delvaux. Hi, Ron.
Hello. How's everybody?
Good. And I think that's so. So we've got invites out to a few more. Maybe somebody will join us. Maybe they won't. So welcome, gentlemen. Hope everyone's doing well. I know a couple of you are recovering from a lengthy CoCo Talk recording earlier this afternoon.
Yeah, we are.
So what do you think? How are things going in the community these days? Are we healthy?
Yeah, they're going pretty well. Hey, I'd like to say thank you for inviting.
Oh, well, and, thanks for joining us, definitely.
Yeah, it's cool. And I have listened to a bunch of your podcasts, and they're great. The in-between stuff is awesome, too. Whoever authors some of that stuff does a great job.
Yeah, that's mostly Mike.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that's what makes our community healthy, is because we have all these good representatives, I think. Good thing.
Yeah, I think we're doing pretty well still. We've got, like I said, we've got a couple of shows, podcasts, whatever. And we've got the other kind of shows. We've got, Tandy Assembly coming up. And, of course, we've got CoCo Fest in another 6 months or so. And, of course, it sounds like we had a pretty good showing for CoCo stuff at VCF Midwest. And like I said, pretty strong stuff, a lot of good participation. There, of course, we did have a little dust up that some of you, I'm sure, are aware of, but I think that's mostly blown over. Well, some people got excited about what I didn't see is a very exciting thing, just a correction, but some people like that better than others, whatever, no big deal. We're moving beyond that, of course. But one thing to note, though, is it seemed like at about the same time, there was some nastiness on Facebook that I know D. Bruce Moore was a little victimized, I would say, by, and he seemed to, there for a while, it seemed like he took it a little bit to heart and seemed like he was pretty worried about the community tearing itself apart. Did you guys feel that way? Did you think that we're all ready to fume out on each other, or did it just sort of seem like oh, welcome, Tony, how you doing? Well, I see him anyway. Did you guys feel like there was a crisis there, or is it more just sort of a couple of
CoCo drama?
Yeah.
It just seems to just blows up for a week, and then it just settles down, and then life goes on.
Right. Well, that's kind of how I feel. I mean, we have people in the community who have some strong personalities. Seemed like maybe there was something else that happened about the same time, which made it seem a little more inflamed. But
The 2 layers, maybe the 2-layer graphic.
oh, well, it wasn't too long after the 2-layer thing. Yeah, and that one got a little rough. We had a discussion here. I guess you guys had a discussion on CoCo Talk too about that. Sometimes it seems like people have the knives out ready for each other. But mostly I think people vent their spleen or whatever, and then they feel better and things calm down. Mostly like real life, maybe like real life, back in preschool sometimes. But go ahead.
I'm sorry. And I was talking to Jim Brain, and this happens in other communities just as well as ours. I mean, there's always going to be a dust up between people. Old rivalries still continue from back in the day as well. And I don't think it's a CoCo community issue. I think it's just people in general, and people are more likely to say things online than they are in person. And I think it's just the whole thing with social media. It's just how the world is today, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I think so.
Very true. Very true.
Well, plus, I mean, I don't think it's a stretch to say that most of us are a little bit geeky. And as an accomplished geek, shall we say, I definitely have seen my share of geek versus geek arguments. And these are the kind of things happen, and usually it's something on a mailing list, and after the first round or two, it becomes here, I'm going to post these URLs for you to read, and then, you posted your URLs for me to read, and that goes back and forth a little bit. But there's always a few people that are, they may be often wrong, but they're never in doubt, and you get some friction there. But like I said, I think you're right. I think other communities, especially other retro communities, other geek communities for sure, have these kind of dust ups, and some are more serious than others. I of course come out of the Linux community, which is notorious for it, and the subject of some newsworthiness outside of this discussion lately too. But so I don't know. I can be a little scratchy. I'm usually okay if other people are a little scratchy, and just get past it. But I hope nobody's too offended by any of that, and certainly I hope nobody's scared by it. Because some people are timid and don't want to fight, and nobody really wants to fight about their hobby anyway, I guess. But I think it's just something that pops up sometimes. Anyway, well, is there any more to?
We probably.
I'm sorry, I was just going to make a short comment. Sorry, this is Brendan. So I must not be well plugged in on Facebook, because I don't think I hardly ever catch any drama there. So I don't know. I just must not be on it often enough or something.
Or maybe you get the right amount.
Maybe. But yeah, with respect to the other dust up, I guess I felt like it was, the correction was a word of the wise is sufficient kind of thing. I didn't particularly think it went on and on. It kept getting brought up by random people here and there, and so I think it probably went on longer than it needed to. But I think your blog post basically described the right way to think about it, and yeah, I mean, I think that was that.
Yeah, I do think the perception of negativity may have been driven a bit by the fact that some other people picked up on it and were they were convinced, shall we say, and that's cool, and I like that, of course. And it's good to think that there was some education going on, but then they kind of wanted to have their say about it, and which kind of prolonged the topic, and I think maybe that added to a perception of negativity that I don't believe was intended by them. It certainly wasn't intended by me, but there it was.
Sure.
But
Yep, understood. Yeah, I think the only concern I have is I enjoy listening to the CoCo Crew podcast, and I enjoy listening to CoCo Talk. I listen to both religiously and keep up as best I can, even though I can't always join in on CoCo Talk, for example. But I actually worry about some of you podcast hosts and especially like Grant and Stevie just getting burnt out producing
yeah.
so much content. So I mean, I'm glad, Grant, that you're helping Stevie with a lot of the production. But I still worry about that. So.
Yeah, no, I understand that too. I mean, they do keep it certainly would seem like a grueling schedule. It would be a grueling schedule for CoCo Crew, just because we do a little more like written preparation or whatever. So they do at least have the luxury of it's more of a free form format that CoCo Talk pursues. Still trying to record every week, sometimes twice on a weekend, and then sometimes in the middle of the week. That's hard to keep up with, I'm sure.
And
so
it's
hopefully,
also hard coming up with content too every week. It's not to talk about sometimes.
I no doubt. I mean, I have trouble just thinking up topics for the one segment I do on a monthly basis. So.
But no, I think we all enjoy doing it. That's why we all come back each week and do it. And like last weekend, I was at VCF Midwest, and then Stevie wasn't able to stream, so we kind of took that weekend off. But no, we're still going to do it every week, and going to continue on with the schedule. And I know I'm his backup, and I know we're going to try to get another person for a backup as well too. So that will help. So when Stevie needs to go do family things and I'm out of town, we still got a third person for a backup, which is good.
Yeah.
I know you guys have been talking about that and putting some feelers out. And it sounds like you're getting some. At least some of it is legitimate. Look like you got a few trolls offering you their dial-up lines for backup, that sort of things too. But hopefully you get some real offers out of that, and that'll hopefully be helpful.
Yeah, I think we have a couple backups already in the plan, so I know Steve is going to be working with them, and hopefully that will work out great. So,
yeah, cool. Well, there's since Tony is here, hope he didn't just disappear. Tony, if you're muted, but if you are on, I wonder if you'd like to talk about the Glenside elections and your own personal situation where you're kind of stepping down from the president, and what kind of changes you think might be coming to Glenside over the short term, the next year or two. Any ideas?
No. Personally, Glenside overall has had more. It's everybody has actually been to emulators, if you will, but not just emulators on the PC. I mean, the Pi does an emulation. Anything that's not the original hardware actually, I guess, is classified as an emulator.
Mm.
And the use of the original CPU code, just means you go back to the 6809, 6309 instruction set, and you just continue to have fun with it. The use of that hardware and the modifications and the add-ons for video, for sound, for telecommunication, the same stuff that we've been doing for 30 plus years, we're still using the same visual environment, meaning the green screen and black lettering, or whatever you set up in a shell under OS 9. and we're still having fun with the same basic instruction set. Now, I don't do programming, yet I love, hardware and making things and modifying. That's something that I've always done. Programming, basic, machine code, C. I can kind of sort of follow what's going on, and I've modified some basic stuff to see if it could be done. But going from scratch, I never really studied the basics to be able to do it from the ground up. I imagine a lot of people are like that. Yet, give me a set of instructions of solder this wire here, jumper it through a diode over to this point, and this will happen. That's what I have super fun with. Hey, I finally got my system up and running. I say finally. Didn't get it going at the CoCo Fest to be able to get onto my hard drives through an OS9 boot. But when I saw what could be done with the CoCo STC, I thought, well, I think maybe that'll be my next foray, because if I can get an image of the hard drive into the STC, I don't need the hard drive except maybe as a flow backup. But how hard is it to copy the security digital chip for a backup? And for crying out loud, for $20 or less on eBay, you could get a 256 gigabyte memory card. I'm serious. Why? How do I know that? Because I've done it.
Sure.
We thought that the problem that I was having getting my SDC up and running may have been because it was too big. Well, through trial and error at Midwest DCF, I downloaded a FAT32 formatter and converted either the XFAT or the NTSF formatted chip. And as some of you may or may not have been there and seen that, it's like, man, I've never seen a 128 gig chip formatted in FAT32. And finally it was able to be read. After next learning curve, the file names were truncated to the 8x3 format, which again, I haven't read the instructions for the CoCo STC card or device, but that was another hang up because I had the full 11, 13 character file name, and they said, there's the problem. Again, right. That's kind of like, programming, but you got to read, and I haven't read it fully yet. So, but the next step is to get that system set up here at the house. Everything got into one box. It's nice and packed nicely, so it'll be easy to pull out and set up. And hopefully I'll be able to get I shouldn't say hopefully, sooner than later, I hope, the hard drive, which is a SCSI and was running under Matt Thompson's SCSI 2.2, will be able to be read, and somebody told me I could do it under Unix, or Linux rather, get an image made of that, load that image onto the STC, and the speed of the SCSI, which was phenomenal when compared to floppy, will become a moot point. And the end goal, seriously, is to join some of these guys that are putting up their old BBSs back online and make them accessible.
Oh,
and
cool.
Had a bug flying around. For 10 years, Glen-sized cup of cocoa ran out of my basement on that computer that you people have seen here and there.
Sure.
And all the information is still on one of 3 hard drives. Actually, it's on all 3 hard drives because I made sure I had a hard drive backed up to a hard drive.
Cool. Cool. So, I think we didn't get an introduction. That was Tony Pedraza speaking, the Glenside, longtime Glenside president and other official. But so it sounds like Tony's still fighting the good fight there and having fun with his CoCo.
I got a question for Tony.
Okay, go ahead.
How many people belong to the computer club? I never knew.
I do not actually have that number. The members in good standing, quote unquote, are those that have paid up dues. That's a tally that would have to be made. When I number one, attendance at CoCo Fest, make a member in good standing for the calendar year, or at least until the next CoCo Fest. Those that can't make it, there is a membership fee at this point. But anybody that's interested in the CoCo, gets put into our database, and they can newsletter, and there is a place in there how to who to contact in terms of the club treasurer for sending in dues to help support the group. So that's a tally that might be able to be made on handylist.com. Verify that or experiment with that and try to find that information out. Or give Bob Swoger a call.
Yeah. Well, I guess the point is the club's healthy and should have at least several dozen members based on the last CoCo Fest or whatever, and probably a few more.
A couple dozen. There were 117 attendees.
There you go.
So each of those attendees are in good standing, right? Because they all basically paid membership to get in. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Pardon me, I'm munching.
Also, coming up soon, we'll have the elections for the Glenside officers. Tony's having a change of residence, and a couple of the other long-term Glensiders are having some, life-changing events, moving and that sort of stuff. And so there's probably be some changes in the executive suite, shall we say, at Glenside, but hopefully the club's still going to keep doing its job, putting on CoCo Fest and guarding the core of the CoCo community.
So is it safe to say that since people are going to be running from outside the Chicago area, that the club will still be based in Chicago, correct? Or is it going to go to a more fluid type of a club, moving outside of the Chicago area?
At least for now, it's going to have to. At least for now, they've got legal entities based in Cook County, Illinois. So if you were going to change that, you'd have to have a process of some sort, and nobody's suggesting that at this point. So I would think as long as we have members on the ground in sufficient numbers in the Chicago area, that then we would assume that it's still a physically based in Chicago kind of club. But with that said, Glenside has been taking members, internationally for a long time now. So I'm not really sure. I would consider it a kind of a virtual club anyway. I don't know. Maybe Tony feels differently. What do you think, Tony?
Am I being addressed? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Well, Yeah.
I lost the network for about a minute and a half. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think what it comes down to is Glenside it's traditionally been started as a local club, but for a long time has been accepting members from around the world. It is with people running from outside of the Chicago area now for the officer positions. Does that significantly change the face of the club? Is it still a Chicago club, or is it a worldwide club, or is it something different?
We have had members supporting the organization from back in the early 90s. So, but the quote unquote guiding committee, if you will, indeed has always been Chicago based, because at the time, the communication capability for planning things like the CoCo Fest, the picnic. I mean, how can you have a national picnic?
Right.
It'd be real fun, but we don't have transporters yet. And so the core of the social group remains in Chicago, with the exception of when we all get together for CoCo Fest. The guiding committee guidelines have been opened up since the beginning of, I guess for the past couple years in a minor way. But this year's nominations for officers, the 4 elected positions, president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer, have indeed been opened, at least nationally, with the recognition that telecommunications have advanced to the point where if there is somebody outside of the local corporate group who wants to be an officer, can be nominated. Indeed has been nominated, but have a presence at the business meetings by telecommunication. I'm looking at Ron Delaveau right now. I mean, he could be an officer by that definition, be as long as the dedication to making the business meetings where things are discussed for guiding the group, planning CoCo Fest, whatever other business comes up that we can do to promote the use and advancement of the color computer is there, is paramount to his involvement in the group. So you want to talk about changes in the community? Well, when it comes to Glenside specifically, that is going to be a major change. Will it get more than 1 or 2 remote officers in the future? Nobody can see the future. But we feel, the secretary, a secretary who takes good notes and has a good presentation, telecom, such as I'm doing, Ron's doing, we're doing, but others are doing vocally. A good presence where they pick up the information, record the information, send it up for publishing in the newsletter, and back to the rest of the other officers who may or may not have been at that meeting, so we all know what's going on. Maybe the secretary could be a remote officer. The treasurer, well, you've got handling money. Right now, the account is in a local Chicago area bank. At least for a couple more years, that should probably stay local. President and vice president, we'll see. Again, are we going to do this all from home or get together and have a good social time? We'll see.
Well, that's how CoCo Talk runs, huh?
Cool.
Did I answer
Well,
the question? I just ramble on.
I think you got around it good enough. What Lake says. So it sounds like, the point I wanted to cover is that Glenside's you're going to have a little bit of a change here. I think it's probably a change for the good to kind of open up, since they do service, a worldwide audience, shall we say. So I think that's good news for the community. The voting will be next month, I guess. So there'll be an announcement hopefully soon on that. So everyone watch out for that. So you can vote for the officers if you care. And if you don't care, well, then you get what you get. Anyway, well, so we had talked about our scuffles, and we talked about our Glenside changes. Anybody have anything else they'd like to kick around?
Well, I've been enjoying going on the computer online and telnetting to BBSs, and I've been doing some, what do they call, beta work for Roger Taylor for his NetMate, and it works pretty well. He's been putting different features on it, and in fact, he may be having it to have a 2-page menu for all the commands and stuff that you can set up before you get it going. It works pretty good. And then I also, just for kicks, put a CoCo 2 together and went online using the same. I have a program called S-Term that I run off of my Windows 7 machine, and that makes it so I can do a USB cable to the RS-232 pack and go online. It's a lot of fun. Even in the stupid black and green screen of the CoCo 2 using Grady term, I was able to go on and, fool around, do a few things. It was just like back in the 1980s, back when all I had was my CoCo 1 and a 300 baud modem,
Did you log into Neil's BBS?
Yeah. That,
it's
and
pretty cool.
I have a few other ones that are around. I'd like somehow to get I don't know, maybe I need another group on Facebook, but we need a little repository that everybody can go to and have a list of BBSs that we can all go and browse.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And it'd be nice if there were some BBSs with CoCo specific content out there. Although I think, honestly, most of us can download stuff from the internet these days, but it might be fun to do it over BBSs.
Yeah, back in the day, I remember using X modem or Y modem and some of those other protocols, and getting the program loaded in and then finding out if it came in and trying it out, and it worked, and it was just exciting.
Well, yeah, it's cool. So that there are some people maintaining BBSs, including Neil, in the community. So that's cool. I guess as this Play-Doh thing is getting some discussion in the retro communities around. I understand Brett Gordon's been making some progress on his Play-Doh terminal. Ron Klein, have you been messing with that?
Yeah, I have. Actually, Brett brought up a terminal about a month ago, I would say, maybe a little bit longer. It's for emulators only right now. He doesn't have the Bitbanger support working quite yet, and it does work with DriveWire Becker, so that's emulators. He's really close to getting it working with DriveWire over the Bitbanger port, so hoping to see that. And it seems to do pretty well. It's a CoCo 3 only. I don't know if there'll be one for the CoCo 2, though. Brett seemed to think with some of the new font designs he's seen, and possibly with some of the graphic capability on the CoCo 2, that maybe something could be done. And Brendan, I don't know if he's looking at with the CoCo VGA, that could be something too. Who knows? But from a
sorry, go ahead, Ron.
Well, no, I was just going to say with Play-Doh, though, it's strictly graphic it's all graphics mode, so I don't even know if the CoCo 2, well, with the CoCo VGA, I'm not sure if it would be able to take advantage of, obviously it would be able to talk to a VGA monitor, get nice clear display. I'm not sure if Brett would be able to take advantage of any features of that for that terminal. I don't know what the library looks like that Thomas has for the Plato client.
Yeah, I'll mention that, basically, we'd still be limited to, 2-color 256 by 192 with the current version of CoCo VGA. If I get to a point of adding higher resolution graphics modes, the sky's the limit there. Then it might be feasible. One of the problems or challenges, I guess I should say, that Plato introduces is that the text characters can be placed anywhere to a pixel alignment. So that means that you can't create a custom character set and then use a CoCo VGA custom character set, because those are that has alignment to the 8x12 pixel grid. So unfortunately that feature doesn't really help with Plato.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I know. As we talk about, with Ron talking about Telnet BBSing and now the Plato client, the one thing in the community that I think was talked about before, and maybe it's a good thing to bring up again, is that, software development always seems to be lagging. And, I'm the first to admit that I haven't put anything out software-wise. I'd like to do something. We have a lot of cool hardware projects still. We have a lot of people with some great ideas, but it seems like anything to promote new software development would be something good. Otherwise, I don't have any complaints with the community at all. Just software development.
Is that a normal? Is that a normal issue in all communities, or is that just more related for the CoCo?
I don't know.
You look at communities like.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Grant.
We have a lot of great hardware, but it seems like a lot of hardware items are on hold because we don't have anybody to write the programs to make it work. Seems to be a big issue here lately. To get the drivers working for sound cards and so forth.
Yeah, I was thinking about this today, and not really as a solution to anything, just sort of thinking back several years ago where there was a point where almost the only things coming out came from Cloud9, and the hardware would come out, and that'd be from Mark, and Mark and Boise are work wives or whatever they are, and so Boise would do the software. Generally for OS 9, but some of the stuff was all for Color Basic or whatever. But it was kind of built in. They were a team, and generally speaking, the software and the hardware would come out together, and you wouldn't have that problem as much. And nowadays, we've kind of extended out. We've got a lot more people producing hardware, but not many of them seem to have a software partner. And it's a little bit of a problem. You get hardware that sounds kind of cool, but without any software to do it, it doesn't do anything. And, using it is beyond a lot of people's software skills to write new stuff for some of these things coming out, or maybe it's not, but maybe they think it is. And even for the people who could be doing it, a lot of times, it's somebody who they don't really know or don't know very well doing it, so they're not necessarily ready to sign up to do the software for something that on a hardware project with somebody they've never worked with. And so I'm really just identifying the problem, but I don't have a solution there, but it's just sort of an observation of how things are a little bit different now from how they used to be. So I don't know. I've done a bit of that myself. Usually the hardware things that I've kind of produced or been part of, like the joystick adapters. I have the feature where you can access the extra buttons on the Sega Joypad. And I fully intend to write a game that does that. And I've fully intended to do that for the last 3 years. and yet I haven't, right? And I've done some other stuff in that period of time, even some other hardware stuff. So sometimes it's a matter of matching up the itch with the scratch, I guess, or whatever the analogy is. Anybody have any ideas how do we fix that? I mean, do we put out bounties for something, or?
Well, I've got a comment on that topic. One of the assembly language is great, and but the thing that it takes a long time to write it. At least maybe somebody who's a little more novice like me. I would actually say things like your basic compiler, John, or Pierre's CMOC, which I've been using a lot lately. Can really help knock out software quickly. I guess, I don't know about you guys, but, real life gets in the way, and, time is extremely limited, and I could spend a year putting together something in assembly that I can do in a month, in C. So, I think people shouldn't dismiss high-level languages, I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
I understand what you're saying, and I agree. And it's one of those that it almost takes a certain level of software maturity or software development skill maturity to kind of develop that nuance or whatever that, okay, it's a higher level language, but that doesn't mean it may be slower, but that doesn't mean it's too slow. It may be bigger, but that doesn't mean it's too big. And so yeah, I mean, if you write your game in assembly language, if you're of sufficient skill, then that probably is the fastest it's going to go, and the most efficient it's going to be with the hardware resources and whatever. But if you wrote it in C and you used up every bit of hardware resources and it was slower but still fun, the same number of frames, the same frame rate or whatever, then what's the difference, right? Well, the difference is how much time did you spend doing it, and if you do find a bug, how hard will it be to fix it? So yeah, I mean, I think using certainly telling people to use C if they're not already familiar with C is probably not much better than telling them to use assembly language. Especially some of the young kids I see nowadays that they have computer science degrees and yet their eyes still glaze over when you tell them to use anything lower level than Python. But sure, I think that'll be good. Like I said, I've been working on the basic compiler, targeting the MC10. And kind of, I don't want to say stalled out, but I kind of have hit a little slump the past couple of weeks with that. But I need to get back on it, and that is part of the motivation. Is start out as just kind of a cool, oh, that's fun to play with. Oh, I can do this. Oh, I can do that sort of thing. But then it's like, well, I'm actually compiling, 30-year-old basic programs written to run on on a time sharing system or something, and actually compiling down to something that runs on the MC10 pretty well. There's probably something here, right? That hopefully you could, enable some people that have some basic skill to produce, basic as in the language skill, to produce, fun or useful programs. So that's been part of the motivation and part of my consideration when making some decisions there. So there, I'm trying to help with that, and Pierre's trying to help with CMOC, and I may have some other similar projects on the back burner. So no pre-announcements here. But yeah, so I think that would be helpful to get. I think it'd be fun or good if we could find ways to coax people out of their shell a bit on their development skills. I mean, most of us, if you love these computers, you probably spend a certain amount of time typing in BASIC when you were a kid or a young person, and you probably didn't type in too many of those games without picking up a little bit of skill. At least you have some idea of how to write something in BASIC, you ought to be able to write something today, whether it's in BASIC or maybe one of the other languages available. So it'd be good if we could coax some of these people out. And I guess we're getting all that around in the circle to, well, number one, I'll put the plug in. Some of those basics can, some of those other languages could target games that run on cartridge, which is, my favorite thing. But that also could target some of this new hardware, especially, things like CoCo VGA, which has, programming CoCo VGA shouldn't be all that much different from programming the graphics modes that already exist, right? I mean, you have to figure out how to set up the modes, but once they're set up, it's still poking data into memory, right?
That's exactly right.
So there's no reason you couldn't go off and produce games for that, or terminal programs or whatever. And even if the custom fonts aren't great for the Plato terminal because they put the characters at odd positions, custom fonts are probably great for an ANSI terminal, which put the fonts put the characters at specific positions, right? So, but yeah. So I do think. I guess it's one of those that comes down to some of us who have a little more computer science or engineering skill. Maybe we should try to devote some of our time to enabling those of us who have a little less skill to be productive. Is that agreeable?
John,
go ahead.
I'm one of the people that I am a program user. When the SDC came out, it was like awesome. Because I was able to find programs that I heard about or saw in Rainbow years ago, and then you can try them and play with them and explore all these different games. And for quite a while, I was stuck on getting BMPs and turning them into, being able to view them on my computer. And then now I've been going online, doing Telnet, and then playing with OS 9. I've got so many different things I can do all the time that I hardly have time to do them all, but I can do a little bit of each one now and then, and I'm just a user. I don't even program anything. What I did program was when I got the SDC, I wanted a front end to come up instead of just the SDC Explorer. I wanted it to say or do something more like a PC, when it comes up, and say that I've got so much RAM and I've got a 6309. So I did a little of that. That was fun, but that's about as far as it goes for me. I do the little tiny BASIC. When I first got my computer back in '83, it was a CoCo 1 with an MPI and 2 drives and a TV. And I started typing stuff in, and I thought, this is ridiculous. So I stopped doing that, and I went to the Color Computer Club of Toledo, Ohio, where I lived. And that was paradise because I was able to, first off, everybody was careful about protecting your programmers. And so we had just public domain stuff. And there was plenty of that. And that kept me busy. And then as time went on, it seemed like a lot of the public domain stuff grew, because people let their stuff go and you were able to get good stuff. But still, this is all floppy based. Now we have the SDC. And it's just opened it up to so much stuff. I mean, it's cool to watch video on YouTube and watch a gameplay and learn how to play it a little bit, and then to shut that off and then go to your computer, your CoCo, turn it on, put that game up and play it and do well, and realize that you burned up 3 hours. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Well, so
Ron, what you're talking about is exactly. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ron.
I'm done.
I was just going to say, what Ron's talking about is exactly why, it would be nice to see more software development. I mean, in my head, one of the things I've wanted to do, and I just need to do it, is it would be a CoCo VGA thing, but Brendan's added tile support, and I'm a big fan of games like Adventure, like we see Jim Jerry doing, or Jim Gary, and then I also like Rogue and NetHack and things like that. Now, those have all been done. At least Rogue has for, OS 9, Nitrous 9. But I think from a basic standpoint, it might lend itself very well. You don't have to have, 60 frames per second graphics going. Yet, you can write something like that in BASIC with characters and yet take advantage of some of the features of some of the new hardware. So you're kind of combining a little bit of both. And you don't have to feel bad about worrying about. Well, yeah, something like that. I mean, that's like a semi-graphics mode, but those type of games seem to lend themselves very well to like a BASIC. And if, eventually if we get to a point where there's a BASIC compiler, maybe some people will start to look at, I can start out very simple. BASIC's not too bad of a language to learn. And as they think they want to get some performance out of it, maybe look at a compiler. Or in the case of, I'm talking about Brendan's CoCo VGA because it lends itself very well to being able to do something in BASIC, yet take advantage of some of the features, maybe with some pokes and things like that of enhanced hardware. So that's kind of like what I'm thinking.
Sure. Well, the other thing I was thinking while Ron D was talking, but maybe we need someone needs to figure out better ways to consume the Color Computer Archive, from your CoCo as opposed to just from your PC's web browser, because that's where you can go and download all those old games or whatever. So I don't have the answer there, and I'm not going to architect the software for it. But
I believe there was a ultimate SDC image of everything off the archive.
There have been stuff like that, and maybe that's the kind of maybe that's good enough. Although any image like that is going to be static. I don't know how much the archive really changes. Well,
here's an example though. Well, I've done all these BMPs and turned them in using I think it's Sockmaster's program High Color, and turn them into BMP files so that you can just run a BMP file and the picture comes up. So I've got a whole bunch of those now that I could probably share with people. It's not protected or anything. They're out there. I mean, there's flags, there's happy birthday, happy anniversary, all kinds of different things that, are gathered together in a directory, and they're shareable. So there's stuff like that.
Yeah, I think the Apple folks had, I forget what it's called, so Mark Overalls will probably be ashamed of me, but they had a program that was kind of equivalent to DriveWire, but for the Apples. And somebody had built something around that where you could basically just download code, through their DriveWire equivalent. You could just download code off of websites and run it on your Apple. And
John, you bring up a good point. With Michael's DW term, he's proved that you can, now use DriveWire from like Disk Extended Color Basic, and there are already hooks into DriveWire where you can mount remote disk images. I mean, you could in theory have something like the SDC Explorer that would let you browse the disk images on the Color Computer Archive and select one, and it would always be current because you're getting the information online. You're not having to worry about populating an SD card. And when you click on it, it could either copy it to your CoCo SDC, or you could just mount it and run that program all from, disk. You don't have to be in Nitrous 9 to do it.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, though. You either have to use DW term or something like it to load, or, in the case of Brett, he's got his YDOS, which is a 16K replacement ROM, and you can issue DriveWire commands right from BASIC, and including mounting disk images like that. So maybe there's a combination of a few different things you could use to get to that point, to actually have an online version of SDC Explorer where it would connect up to a repo like the CoCo archive.
Cool.
That'd be awesome.
All right, well, I'm going to take a look at that one.
Cool. That sounds promising. I see Curtis Boyle has joined us. Welcome, Curtis.
Hey, Curtis.
Oh, sorry I'm late.
No problem. We're just solving the CoCo World's problems on how people can access code from their CoCos and how
as long as it doesn't involve any arithmetic shifting, I'm good.
Yeah, we're trying to avoid that one. At least now we know that if we do have an arithmetic shift problem, we can solve it with the proper branch on overflow. Let's see. Well, what else, guys? What else is going on in the community? What?
I did mention Nitrous 09.
Yeah. Well, we definitely could have a Nitrous 9 browser for our coming website with CoCo software, which actually is kind of similar to what the TRS-80 folks are talking about with I can't remember the guy's name now, but they have the web store for the Z80 based TRS-80s. And
the App Store, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could do the same kind of thing. Somebody could.
Not a CoCo project, but it could be.
Yeah, well, exactly. And so I personally have about 3 projects down from before I can get to that one, and not to mention my 150 other projects that I'm staring at. So
I know what that's like.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do we get more programmers to program for the new hardware coming out? I mean,
why can't we have a PC make it for us? We just tell the PC with AI, what we want.
Well,
right?
Google may be able to do that for you before long, but I don't think they can do it just yet.
No.
I mean, one thing is what we're kind of making a little fun of, but on the CoCo Talk segment, we've got Steve Bjork trying to teach people how to program in assembly language. Now, I'm not sure a web show is the method I would choose for that, but if other people feel like they're learning good, then that is certainly excellent, and it's certainly a good attempt at building some programmers or getting some. Probably it's more like taking existing programmers in BASIC or whatever and extending their skills to a new language, but that's kind of what we need too. So I don't know. I mean, I have thought about, when I'm thinking about tech segments, there's a few other languages out there for the CoCo. There's certainly Logo, and there's Pilot, and maybe a couple other, certainly various versions of Forth or whatever. I've thought about doing segments on those. I'd kind of be a little bit more of a learner on some of those. But maybe I should do more segments on some of those instead of talking about various hardware items or whatever.
John, do you remember when ways back in time somebody was talking about somebody had made or was making drop-down menus and 3D frames and different things for, is it RS-DOS or?
There was someone. Yeah, I think that was Hugo. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that a great idea to have like a plug-in thing to where, somebody maybe like me could figure out a way to throw something, make an app of some kind,
Sure.
I mean, is that something that's coming or something possible, or is it just too hard?
I don't know. I don't know that much about Hugo's project. I'm not sure where he's going with it. I think his latest attentions have been on his Boomerang Kim or whatever. Actually, kind of what you're talking about sounds like the package that Nick Morentis was talking about. He was having trouble with, where he had the old copy he had bought that the disk didn't work anymore, and he was what was it called?
Window Master.
Window Master. Yeah.
Circomps. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I mean. But that kind of a tool, I can see where that would be useful for people if it didn't have problems with not being able to distribute because of licenses or whatever. But we've certainly got some people in the community that have interesting skills that I think could be applied to something like that. They just have to want to.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, just having a segment on educating people as to what's available too. I mean, there's like Graph Express by Jeff Steidel and Sundog that's got like 4-voice music and sprites and windows and stuff built in. You can call from BASIC as well. Circomp's Window Master. There's a couple of different BASIC compilers from WasatchAware and Computerware and a few others too that neither of the shows really covered up to this point. It might be worthwhile having some segments on that. And I know you guys do go to the deep dives a lot more than we do, so that might be a better for your show. We just kind of gossip a lot.
What's that tool? What's that tool that Jamie Cho is working with? That's kind of a sprite development.
The one he was demoing at the fest.
Is Dynasprite?
Yeah, Dynasprite. I mean, that's an example of another. There's several of these tools, and a couple of them are very good, but they still have the complexity of requiring some programming skill and learning the tools themselves. And
plus isn't Dynasprite
is daunting?
Isn't Dynasprite set up to be called from assembly language, or is it set up from BASIC too?
I think it's assembly language. I think that's one of the issues that I'm thinking of is with Dynasprite. It looks like a really cool thing if you buy into it, and you have to sort of buy into it and sort of follow a certain amount of that process. I forget who wrote it now, but if you kind of buy into his process, it sounds like it works pretty well, and that's fine. But if you're a curmudgeonly old programmer like myself, you have your own process, right? And you don't necessarily want to buy into somebody else's stuff. And if it's easy enough to learn that you can kind of adapt it to your own processes, then that's fine. But if it looks a little scary, then maybe people won't do it, and maybe that's where we are with Dynasprite. There's a new one, somebody on the list, something Smythe, I think is his name, that's popped up and says he's doing a something similar to Dynasprite, but he's targeting the 6309. Posted a couple of videos. Looks like he's making good progress, but I don't know. I haven't seen his code, but I kind of suspect it'll be the same sort of thing. He'll have something that can produce really cool demos and probably can do really good games, and it just may not be appealing to anyone but the original author. So, I'm not sure how you overcome that problem.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with those two projects is that, like you said, they require semi-language, and if you're learning a semi-language, you kind of figure out your own way, like you do, I do, Nick does, everybody else. I think if we do stuff that's more geared to the basic programmers, like Ron was saying, like get some of these compilers and stuff, or libraries like Graph Express, which is callable. You just set up a string in BASIC and you just do an exec and it figures out the command you're doing and does it. Maybe we need to do some tutorials on something like that and some little demo programs to show that it's not too hard even from BASIC. I mean, one thing I am planning on doing eventually with the Nitrous 9 Ease of Use is now that I put in the new extended Graphics 2 package, which has the setting up menu bars and menus and stuff like that all done through Basic 9 GFX2 calls, which is fairly easy compared to trying to learn a semi-language, is to try to do a tutorial on how to use that kind of stuff, like how do you set up the mouse to do a drop-down menu and tell you what menu option you picked, etc., all in BASIC.
Well, yeah, so since you're here, Curtis, that's something that probably hasn't got as much coverage on the CoCo crew as certainly as a CoCo Talk, but maybe you give a little rundown on your ease of use and kind of what it is and where you are with it. I know you've gone to a public beta, I guess, or did you go beyond that?
No, it's public beta. Basically, it's going to be a beta for a while until I get all the original feature plan stuff in there that I want.
Okay.
Bill Noble's helping with some of that too. Right now, we're going into bug fixing mode. There's a few bugs we discovered with Nitrous 9 3.3 and ease of use both, and we'll get it fixed up. But basically, the purpose of it is to make a nice simple distribution with some enhancements to G Shell and Multiview to make it much easier to launch programs from the GUI as opposed to having to set up custom script files and custom launch commands and all that kind of stuff. You don't want it to be nice and easy and just have a text editor and away you go, or even do it from within the GUI itself eventually. With built-in help and with built-in third-party apps, there's standard Tandy microware apps and everything all installed in one shot with a pre-done hard drive image. And eventually we'll be adding in other drivers for DriveWire and everything else too. For now, until the debugging phase is done and we're kind of roughly out of beta, we're keeping it restricted to either using one of the two main emulators or the CoCo SDC, just because it's easier to debug if you only have a certain set of hardware you're trying to debug the rest of the system with instead of worrying was this bug caused because I'm using an IDE driver or was SCSI driver or whatever else type thing. So the basic premise of it is basically just to make it nice, easy for the user. And Ron, you can attest to hopefully to that it's easier for the user than the standard run this install script and then mod patch this and that kind of thing. So it's just basically make it easy to use for the non-technical user.
Cool. And it's getting there.
Yeah, so I do think that Nitrous is always, or OS 9 in general, has always had a little bit of a, like say, a buy-in kind of problem that, it's harder, a little bit harder to just tip your toe in and then do anything. And so, I remember certainly back in the day, trying to figure out, we have to run this cobbler thing. Well, didn't I already boot OS 9? Well, what am I doing making another?
What do you want me to do with my shoes? What?
Exactly. OS 9 gen. Oh, that sounds so much better. Oh, wait, it's just as hard to use, too.
Well, I thought he told me to use Easy Gen, and he told me to use Quick Gen. What?
Exactly. And so... So I think it's probably good to expand that out. And of course, once you go to OS 9 or Nitrous 9, there's a lot of tools available that there's more programming languages available, and there's a fair number of games, even if they're not necessarily arcade games or whatever, but still certainly text adventure, or not even text, but adventure games and that sort of stuff, and puzzle games. Certainly play just as well on OS 9. There's nothing. It's not like no, you can't use games on OS 9.
Yeah, you can do some arcade games. I mean, you just have to keep your expectations realistic. I mean, having a 9 obviously helps, but you're not going to be fiddling around with making virtual screen buffers that are 200K long or anything, and virtual horizontal scrolling unless you want to basically load everything up and then shut the OS down temporarily. Which Alan DeCock has done in the past as an experiment. It does work, but that's a bit involved. The other thing is too for me is that for basic programmers, Basic 09 is a beautiful language. It's kind of like Pascal and Basic combined. You can use line numbers if that's what you used to, but you can gradually wean yourself away out of it, start using labels and procedures, and there's a lot of extensions to the language that are built in, and there's a few more that we just added on the beta 1. And it's quite fast because it's got integer types and string types and complex data types and stuff too. So it's great for learning more modern type stuff too. So I'm hoping to eventually do a series on Basic 09 as well. I know Nick's even been bugging me about that. So
yeah, it's a great language, no question.
Yeah, definitely.
I was thrilled to be able to put 2 sound files in my version of the beta there of Nitrous 9 and have them work. It's even better. That was
very cool. Who hasn't got much chance to speak? Hadn't heard a lot out of Mike. Hadn't heard too much out of Grant.
I haven't heard anything out of Tony since I joined the call.
Yeah.
You're muted, Tony.
Anyone else have perspective on the community? Anybody have problems they think are brewing, or something great that's about to hatch? Anything like that?
What do you think about the community? Do you think it's going to be growing next year and have another huge CoCo Fest, or do you think we've kind of plateaued?
I don't know. I mean, like I said, I was just counting up the statistics this week on some of our downloads, and you published that number, 30,000 episode downloads. And that's all our episodes, but that's just this calendar year, just 2018. 30,000 episode downloads. That was kind of amazing to me. I mean, that's that means there's somebody out there downloading the back catalog, and which implies that they're fairly new to the community. You know what I mean? And so somewhere there's some interest, and so at some point we probably will plateau, I would think. But just because you kind of expect that sort of you get that little Cambrian explosion at the beginning, and then things level out a little bit. But then again, we even at 100 some at CoCo Fest, I mean, we typically get a couple of thousand downloads in a month. Well, there's an extra 1,800 people that didn't come to CoCo Fest. So it'd be nice if half of those people showed up. We'd shut down the hotel. The Chicago police would probably come and bust us.
I do know the Facebook group. We're still getting new people adding on there all the time, so I think it's still growing. Whether there'll be ones that actually attend shows or not, I don't know. But at least the community as a whole, I think, is growing. I don't know if the pace is the same, but it's not shrinking and it hasn't stagnated yet.
Well, stuff like CoCo Forever was a really neat addition to being able to put something new on your machine.
Yeah, that Bruce is an interesting guy, right? He thinks a little differently. And his projects have been a little different. You know, his book that he wrote with the Forest of Doom, and then his video novel, or whatever exactly the right term is for CoCo Forever. I wonder what he's going to do next year.
Yeah, he definitely thinks outside the box, which is nice. It gets the creative juices flowing for other people too, I think.
Well, yeah. Well, so I saw that Long Branch Never video, and I thought, "Oh God, what is this?" but it turns out it's a game blog. Well, I can understand that one. Yeah, I thought, oh, we're gonna have a feature length film now or something. That'd be funny.
A lot of CGI
There's a movie out called Maniac, and it just came out on Netflix, and they have a whole bunch of. It's a strange series. It's anyway. They have a lot of old computers in it, even though it's takes place modern. It's like none of the technology advanced much. They have
alternative timeline type thing.
Yeah, they have 2 or 3 times I saw Commodore monitors. And you couldn't see you can only see a keyboard. You couldn't see what it was hooked up to. Could have been a Commodore that they were using to check people in, like at an airport or something. And
there's no way technology could stagnate that long.
Let's hope. Yeah, Archer's another series that does that. You'll see stuff that looks like, Tandy 2000s and Tandy 6000s and stuff like that on the desks.
Cool.
How is our other brother computers doing? Is their community doing pretty well as well?
The Tandy stuff?
Yeah, the Tandy and the TRS-80s.
So I haven't been in those meetings, Mike. Do you have a feel for that? How do Pete and Randy feel upbeat these days?
Yeah, I think there's some activity in the Tandy world. There's some new software there. It's not as active as the CoCo community, but but there is interest, and there are a lot of people using it. I know Pete Bartlett sells plenty of his expansions for the models 1, 3, and 4. So in the Z80 world, there's still some life there, and there's still some development going on.
Don't they have like an SDC or something, a free HD or something they call it?
Fred.
There's the Fred, which is just a hardware or hard drive emulator.
Oh.
It's strictly a hard drive emulator. And then Peter Bartlett has a device that kind of emulates the expansion interface, but it also gives you like virtual floppies to SDC card or compact flash. It has internet capability. It has VGA port on it, Atari joystick ports. So you can it's a one-stop shop. You can get just about anything available for the Z80 hardware in one package. So good products.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, is that community, are they having the same issue we have where we're getting too unbalanced? Like we get too much hardware, not enough software. 10, 15 years ago, it was the other way around. We had too much new software, not enough new hardware type thing. Do they have that same balance issue we do?
It's kind of hard to say because while things are going on, it's much slower than in the CoCo world.
Oh, okay.
And as far as hardware development goes, Peter Bartlett's devices are kind of the top end of the market right now. There's nothing really competing with it. And Ian's got his produces the Fred product. But really, those things are about all you need. I mean, they kind of give you everything you could potentially have. And there's some software development going on there. I know Pete Satinsky has written a few games. He's got a wiki browser that runs and uses the high resolution graphics board on the Z80 computers. So, and he's had that at shows. It's pretty cool. You can actually pull the graphics down from the internet.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It is. It's pretty. So you can do all the wiki surfing on it, and
Well, like I said, it's just there are things going on and happening. It just tends to be slower. And of course, there's a huge catalog of all kinds of software for the Z80 machines, and you can get it all in just like you can on the CoCo. You can just get one huge image that has everything that was ever written for, and that's a pretty big catalog. Seems to be some interest in Xenix operating system as well. I think some of the source code's been made available to that. So on some of the bigger systems.
On the 68,000 base TRS-80s, just to throw another processor in there.
Yeah, but also Xenix on the Intel platforms as well.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, you mentioned the Fred there. Apparently, the Fred emulates, those big Tandy drives with the keys on the front of them or whatever.
Yeah.
That I guess those are the same ones that the Tandy CoCo hard disk controller would plug into.
Right.
And so now Ian's speculating that the CoCo hard disk controller might work with a Fred, and he was looking for somebody who had one that's been opened up that could send him one. He might try to clone it. Meanwhile, I'm thinking maybe I should buy a Fred and just try it. But like we say, we don't really need another hard drive solution right now. So it's
actually, Paul Barton just made a single chip a hard drive interface.
Yeah, the IDU.
Yep.
Yeah, we don't have a shortage of those.
Yeah. Oh, Lord. Well, we do have a shortage of the Super IDE, right? It seems like people always want one of those, but Mark hasn't been making them for a while.
Yeah.
Well.
But like we were mentioning before, like the CoCo right now, I think there's a ton of new hardware, and like there's prototypes from Jim Brain and a few others too, a bunch of other stuff that, he's not skilled enough to write the drivers or software to run them, and then a lot of us that can write the software just don't have the time, either because of our own projects or work or whatever else.
Yeah.
So at what point does this become a crisis? Because if we don't get people to write programs for these new hardware, then the hardware makers are going to stop making the hardware and spending time and go to another platform.
Yeah, we all can't be Ed Snyder, who's like a robot and can do 24/7 development of both simultaneously. So
yeah, well, I suspect. I mean, the projects that come out that are clearly useful, there'll probably be somebody who will want to write software for them. It's the projects that come out that are, neat, but maybe not clearly useful to everyone. Those will be the ones that would tend to have the people that hold back. And if those are the projects that eventually somebody says, well, I made these things and then nobody buys them, then we'll have less of those. I guess I'm maybe it sounds a little Darwinian, but I guess I'm saying that I think at some point that would sort of balance itself out. We may lose some of the excess hardware stuff, but it may be the stuff that we maybe didn't as a group want all that badly anyway.
Yeah, the more niche products.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not too worried at this point. Maybe we should wait at least until we see somebody actually leave before we worry about it. We can then, if it's the wrong person leaving, we can try to figure out how to lure them back.
Now we can put an X Prize together.
Well, there you go.
Figure out something that we all want, and then pool some money and have a contest.
Not a terrible idea. All right. Well, on that note, now that we've not solved anything, but mostly identified the good project or the good problems that we have, and without too many bad problems, I think that's not so bad.
It is the state of things.
Yeah, this is the state of things, right? But I think we've been going for a little over an hour, so I think I'm going to probably draw this one to a close. But I do thank everyone for taking some time to be with us. So it's Brendan and Grant, Curtis, Ron D., Tony Pedrezza, and, of course, the hosts Mike Rowan and Ron Klein and myself. I think we've all had a good discussion, and, clink the glasses or whatever. It's a shame we can't go out to Portillo's for a hot dog. But maybe we can save our hot dog budgets up for CoCo Fest, or maybe there'll be some cool place near Tandy Assembly next month.
It's a donut dilemma.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Let's see. What I heard something today was we all scream for ice cream, but we all go nuts for donuts, right?
That's right.
Oh well.
Combine the two. Oh my God.
Exactly. All right. Well. All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. A good talk. So carry on, CoCo forever, and all that good junk. Whatever. Thanks, y'all.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Idaho. Margaret Winston powers up her color computer to play her favorite cartridge game. But somehow, what should appear blue appears red, and the colors will not return to normal until after several consecutive presses of the reset button. It's dismissed as coincidence. Kansas. A man dials his favorite BBS from his color computer. 1,200 miles away at the exact same moment, a man witnesses his modem take the phone line off hook all by itself. Just chance, or are there other unseen forces at work? Florida. A man powers on his color computer 3, not realizing that his pet cat is standing on the keyboard. He leaps back in shock as the ghoulish image of microware engineers appear on the screen. It's dismissed as imagination. Now, Time Life Books announces an important new library, Mysteries of the Color Computer, a series that explores the most controversial phenomena of the color computer and tells you everything that can be known. The Midwest. A mother feels terrible dread fall upon her. No. Far away at that exact same moment, her daughter screams as she inadvertently deletes a Telewriter 64 document. Just chance? Or is it telling us something about our own untapped capability? Mysteries of the Color Computer goes deeper into unexplained phenomena than ever before. It documents the facts and uncovers what people were never willing to talk about. Texas. Tandy documents are unearthed that describe an unknown 160 by 200, 256 color mode for the Color Computer 3, but ancient engineering notes allude to a 300 by 200, 256 color mode. To date, no 256 color mode has been found. Some believe that a 256 color mode exists, while others dismiss it as myth. Is it real or just imagination? To experience Mysteries of the Color Computer, examine your first volume, Mysterious Silicon, for 10 days free. Then decide whether you wish to dismiss it.
To order your first book, Mysterious Silicon, call 1-800-6309. Examine it for 10 days. Pay just $12.99 plus $2.98 shipping and handling. Other books will follow, one about every other month. Keep only the ones you want. Cancel at any time. Call 1-800-6309. Is your workspace crowded with color computers, multi-packs, and cables? Do your outlets look like potential fire hazards? Do you suffer from constant power interruptions? Then consider CoCo Colo. CoCo Colo offers co-location with immediate availability. We can have your color computer set up in one of our facilities the same day you order service. We offer plans that range from cabinet space for a single color computer, a full cabinet of color computers, or thousands of color computers. Access your color computers from any web browser with CoCo Colo CoCo Connection software and CoCo Colo KVMJ adapters. CoCo Colo provides secure, reliable data center space for your critical color computer infrastructure with direct access to our support staff, network providers, and cloud specialists. Free up space in your home or business office today. Reliable power for your color computer. 24-hour customer service. Protection of your color computer from data theft and natural disaster. Experience our impeccable customer service and the benefits of color computer as a service. There's only one place. CoCo Colo. Plans starting as low as $100 per month. High-speed internet access required.
Welcome back to Neil's Corner on episode 40. Wow, doesn't that sound good? Episode 40. I just like that roll. Can't believe we're at the 40th episode already. Anyways, unfortunately, I got some bad news for you. In the words of Jerry Seinfeld, I have nothing. I have no material for you guys this month. I was going to review Gnome's Quest 2, and I did get as far as playing the game on my CoCo 3, but unfortunately, I can't figure it out. I don't want to just wing this one. So I actually want to learn the game. So what I'm going to do this next upcoming month, I'm actually going to RTFM. Luckily, the manual is available. I noticed it on Color Computer Archive, so I'm going to go through it. I'm going to learn this game because it definitely looks really cool, but unfortunately, I have no idea how to play it. I just keep going through the static screens and nothing's really happening. So I know I'm missing something. So I'm going to read the manual. I apologize for not having any material this month, but next month, definitely stay tuned. I will do a full review on Gnome's Quest 2. Until then, happy CoCoing and game on.
This month, Radio Shack features great bargains on TRS-80 computer system furniture. The new deluxe terminal stand is perfect for the Model 2, 12, and 16. It rolls easily on locking casters and has 3 height adjustments of 26, 27, and 28 inches. Normally $179, it's available this month for just $129. Our budget computer table is perfect for the Model 3 or color computer. Its 48 by 24 surface affords plenty of room without taking too much space. Normally $69.95, it's just $54.95 this month at Radio Shack. Our popular desktop printer shelf is just $19.99. It features walnut veneered side panels and allows tractor feed paper underneath. It works great with the DMP 100 and 200. See these and other computer furniture bargains only at Radio Shack, a Tandy company.
Computing is a lot of fun. However, you must know the rules of computing and obey them, or you will find it a very dangerous sport. A computer safety manual may be obtained from your local safety council, police department, Radio Shack Computer Center, or Radio Shack store. If you suspect a malfunction with your computer under conditions such as the unit has been dropped, thrown, or stepped on, the power cord is damaged, frayed, or glowing, the unit is exposed to rain, water, or mountain dew, do not attempt any further adjustment, as doing so may further damage your computer. Remember, there are no serviceable parts inside the unit. Back away slowly, move diagonally if possible, and avoid all direct eye contact with the unit. When you have reached a safe distance, contact a professional Radio Shack service technician. They will provide further instructions and may recommend protective clothing containing the unit with inert materials such as sand or vermiculite, creating an expedient shelter. For your own protection, be sure to follow all instructions provided in your computer's manual or by Radio Shack service technicians. Computing can be a pleasurable experience as long as you always remain alert. Don't be a clown or show off while computing. You are just inviting injury or death.
Listen to all those commercials. Plug, plug, plug. Well, we have to pay the bills somehow, right? Well, we have reached the end of episode 40, and we definitely hope you enjoyed this show. As usual, I'd like to give thanks to our host, John Linville, for procuring all those news articles you hear every month, and also following through with yet again another amazing tech segment. This tech segment actually really interests me a lot because, as you all know, I am definitely into cartridges. So any kind of new technology or old technology we can add to game carts, that's fine by me. They stand to the test of time. Also like to thank Mike Rowan for once again providing all those amazing commercials and bumpers you hear, and Boise Pete for being a part of the show, and now a new member, Ron Klein, for being a part of our show. The list of hosts is getting pretty large. I'd also like to thank everybody who participated in the Roundtable discussion. Sorry I couldn't be there, but it was definitely informative, and it was great to hear. Last but not least, I'd like to thank all of you for listening to our show each month and sending us your feedback. We always like to hear from you. As like I say, if it wasn't for you listening, there'd really be no point in doing this show. It'd be kind of silly. Well, until next month, retro and CoCo forever.
It's a blast from the past.
Please listen carefully.
CoCo.
Like there's no tomorrow.
What is this crazy rock and roll music anyway? It's a blast from the past.